Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was a pre-war legend who became the sage of the Wasteland. Naruto x Piper Wright Fallout 4. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Sage of the Wasteland. The first sensation was cold. A deep, biting cold that seemed to seep into his very bones, a stark contrast to the familiar warmth of the sun on his face as he had last remembered it. The second was a profound silence, a stillness that was utterly alien to a man who had lived his life amidst the constant hum of a bustling village, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the clamor of battle. Here, there was only the rhythmic, almost imperceptible hiss of something. Naruto Uzumaki's eyelids fluttered open, heavy as stone shutters. The world swam into focus, a disorienting blur of muted grays and sterile whites. He was suspended, floating in a viscous, translucent fluid within a cylindrical glass container. Wires and tubes, like metallic vines, snaked across his body, tethered to unseen machinery. Panic, a sensation he hadn't truly felt in decades, flickered in his chest, a tiny ember in the vast, cold emptiness of his mind. He tried to move, to break free, but his limbs were leaden. Unresponsive. His chakra, the very essence of his being, was a sluggish, trickling stream where once a raging river had flowed. He could feel Kurama, his partner, his friend, a silent, slumbering giant within him, his presence a faint, reassuring warmth in the back of his mind, but his voice was absent. Fragments of memory, sharp and painful, pierced the fog of his consciousness. The roar of the 10 tails. The desperate, last-ditch sealing jutsu, the faces of his friends, etched with grim determination. Sasuke, Sakura, Hinata, their images faded like smoke, leaving behind an ache of loss so profound it threatened to drown him. A sudden jolt, a screech of protesting metal, and the fluid around him began to drain away. The hiss intensified, and with a final, shuddering sigh, the glass cylinder retracted into the ceiling, leaving him lying on a cold, metal slab. The wires and tubes detached themselves with a series of soft clicks. He took a breath, a real breath, and the air that filled his lungs was stale, ancient, tasting of dust and decay. He sat up, his body slowly, painfully, reacquainting itself with the simple act of movement. He looked down at his hands, calloused and strong. The hands of a warrior, a leader, a Hokage. They were unaged, a testament to the preservation power of the seal. He was still in the prime of his life, yet a sense of immense time, of ages past, hung heavy in the air. The room was a circular chamber, its walls lined with similar, now empty, stasis pods. A single, massive door, emblazoned with a strange, deer-like symbol, dominated one wall. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs trembling slightly, a humbling experience for a man who could once leap across entire forests. He reached for his chakra, truly reached for it this time, and found it sluggish, like a half-frozen river. He could feel its potential, the immense reservoir of power still within him, but it was different. The natural energy of the world, the very thing he had mastered as a sage, felt wrong. It was thin, weak, tainted with something acrid and unfamiliar. He placed his hand on the metal door. It was cold, unyielding. He channeled a small amount of chakra into his palm. A simple pulse of energy. The door didn't budge. He frowned. A door like this should have been no obstacle. He tried again, this time forming the hand signs for a basic unlocking jutsu. Nothing. Frustration warred with a growing sense of unease. He took a step back, his mind racing. If his jutsu were ineffective, he would have to rely on brute force. He began to gather what little chakra he could muster into his fist. The air around his hand shimmered, but the familiar, swirling vortex of a Rasengan refused to form. It was like trying to start a fire with damp wood. He gritted his teeth. Fine. If he couldn't go through it, he would go through it. He drew his arm back, his muscles coiling, and unleashed a punch with all the physical strength he could muster. The impact echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap. A spiderweb of cracks appeared on the door, and with a second, more powerful blow, it shattered, a cascade of metal and wires. Beyond the door lay a long, dark corridor, the air thick with the smell of ozone and decay. Emergency lights flickered intermittently, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist in his peripheral vision. He proceeded with caution, his senses on high alert. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the crunch of debris under his feet. The corridor opened into a vast, cavernous room filled with strange, bulky machines. Their surfaces covered in a thick layer of dust. Consoles with dark screens and silent keyboards lined the walls. It was a place of advanced technology, far beyond anything he had ever seen, yet it was a tomb. A relic of a forgotten age. He found a set of stairs leading upwards, towards a faint sliver of light. As he ascended, a new sound reached him, a low, guttural moaning. It was a sound of pain, of hunger, of something that had once been human but was no longer. He emerged into a smaller, ancillary room, the source of the light a gaping hole in the ceiling. And there, hunched over a desiccated corpse, was a creature that would forever haunt his nightmares. It was vaguely humanoid in shape, but its skin was a patchwork of raw, peeling flesh, its limbs elongated and twisted at unnatural angles. It turned its head, its eyes glowing with a feral, mindless hunger, and let out a blood-curdling shriek. Without a moment's hesitation, Naruto reacted. He moved with a speed that was still breathtaking. A blur of motion that the creature couldn't track. He didn't have a Rasengan, but he had his fists, and he had his instincts. He drove his fist into the creature's chest, the impact pulping its innards. It collapsed in a heap, silent and still. He stood over the fallen creature, his heart pounding. This was the new world. A world of decay, of strange technology, and of monsters. He looked up at the hole in the ceiling, at the sliver of a sky that was a sickly, brownish yellow. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the world he had known, the world he had fought and bled to protect, was gone. He pulled himself up through the hole, emerging into the blinding light of a dying sun. He was on a small, rocky outcrop overlooking a vast, desolate landscape. Ruined buildings, skeletal and gray, clawed at the sky. Twisted, leafless trees dotted the scorched earth. The air was thick with a hazy, yellow dust that stung his eyes and throat. He took in the scene, a panorama of utter devastation, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt a flicker of despair. He was alone, a stranger in a strange and terrifying land. But then, he felt it again, the faint, reassuring warmth of Kurama in the back of his mind. He was not entirely alone. And he was Naruto Uzumaki. He was the seventh Hokage. He had faced down gods and monsters. He had brought peace to a world torn apart by war. He would not be broken by this. He took a deep breath, the dusty air filling his lungs, and he began to walk. His journey through the wasteland was a baptism by fire. He encountered more of the feral creatures, which he learned from a tattered pre-war poster were called ghouls. He learned to fight them with a brutal efficiency, his taijutsu sk. Ills more than a match for their mindless ferocity. He learned to be silent, to move like a ghost through the ruined landscape, his shinobi training serving him well in this new, deadly environment. He found water, a precious, life-giving resource, in stagnant pools and rusty pipes. It tasted of metal and chemicals, but it was wet. He found food in the form of strange, mutated creatures that scurried through the ruins. He learned to cook them over a small, smokeless fire, his survival skills honed by years of missions in the wild. He also found remnants of the world that was. Tattered books, their pages brittle with age. Holotapes, small, rectangular devices that, when he managed to find a working player, would play ghostly voices from the past, telling stories of a world of unimaginable comfort and convenience. A world that had apparently destroyed itself in a storm of fire and radiation. It was on the third day of his journey that he stumbled upon the settlement. It was a pathetic collection of shacks and tents, huddled together behind a makeshift wall of scrap metal and junk. A group of about 20 people, their faces gaunt and etched with fear, were cowering behind the wall, armed with crude, pipe-like firearms. They were being besieged by a large group of raiders, men and women clad in leather and metal, their faces hidden behind grotesque masks. The raiders were laughing, taunting the settlers, firing their weapons indiscriminately at the flimsy defenses. Naruto watched from a distance, his eyes narrowed. He could have bypassed the conflict, continued on his solitary journey. It was not his fight. But then he saw a young girl, no older than 10, clutching a dirty, one-eyed teddy bear, her face streaked with tears. And in that moment, he knew he could not walk away. He moved, a silent, unseen force, circling around the raiders' position. He found their leader, a mountain of a man with a booming voice and a wicked-looking axe. The man was bellowing orders, Clea. RLY enjoying the terror he was inflicting. Naruto created 2 shadow clones, a simple jutsu that, thankfully, still worked, though it was more draining than he remembered. The clones were a pale imitation of his true power. But they would be enough. He sent the clones in as a distraction, one from each flank. They moved with a speed that the raiders couldn't comprehend, a blur of orange and black. They didn't use any flashy jutsu. Just their fists and feet, but it was more than enough. The raiders, who were used to clumsy, predictable firefights, were thrown into chaos. While the raiders were distracted, Naruto moved in on the leader. The man was roaring in frustration, swinging his axe wildly at the clones, who were dancing around him, taunting him. Naruto appeared behind him, a whisper in the wind. "Looking for me," he said, his voice calm and steady. The raider leader whirled around, his eyes wide with surprise. He swung his axe, a clumsy, telegraphed move. Naruto sidestepped it with ease, and with a single, precise chop to the man's neck, the leader crumpled to the ground, unconscious. With their leader down, the remaining raiders panicked. They were not warriors, they were bullies. And without their leader to direct them, they were lost. The settlers, emboldened by the sudden turn of events, began to fire back with more confidence. The raiders broke and fled, disappearing into the desolate landscape. A tense silence fell over the settlement. The settlers slowly emerged from behind their barricade, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. They looked at Naruto, at his strange clothes, his bright, spiky hair, his calm, confident demeanor. He was unlike anyone they had ever seen. One of the settlers, a grizzled old man with a long, white beard, approached him cautiously. Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Naruto offered him a small, reassuring smile. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said. "And I'm just a traveler, passing through." The old man stared at him. His eyes filled with a hope he hadn't felt in years. You're a hero," he stammered. Naruto's smile widened. "No," he said, his gaze sweeping over the grateful faces of the settlers. "I'm just a man who believes in helping people." It was then that a new figure emerged from the crowd. A young woman with short, dark hair, a determined glint in her eyes, and a small, hand-cranked printing press slung over her shoulder. She was holding a notepad and a pen, and she was looking at him with an intensity that was both unnerving and intriguing. "I'm Piper Wright," she said, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "And I think you and I have a lot to talk about." Naruto looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, at the insatiable curiosity that seemed to radiate from her. And he knew that his solitary journey was over. He had found something in this desolate wasteland. He had found a purpose. And, perhaps, he had found a new beginning. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Public Occurrences. The silence that followed the raiders' retreat was heavy, thick with unspoken questions and the palpable scent of ozone from discharged energy weapons. The settlers of the small, ramshackle camp stared at Naruto, their expressions a cocktail of raw fear and burgeoning awe. They saw a man who had appeared from the dust and ruin like a spirit of vengeance, dismantling a seasoned raiding party with an economy of motion that bordered on the supernatural. They saw the strange, vibrant orange of his patched-up coat against the monochrome brown of the wasteland. A splash of impossible color in a world bleached of hope. Piper Wright, however, saw something different. Where the settlers saw a savior, she saw a story. A massive, world-shaking story. Bigger than anything she had ever chased. Her reporter's instincts were screaming, a high-pitched siren in her soul that drowned out the lingering fear. This man, Naruto Uzumaki, was not just a tough wasteland wanderer. The way he moved, the way he dispatched the raider leader without a weapon, the serene confidence that radiated from him like heat from asphalt, it didn't fit any known category. He wasn't a gunner, not a raider. And he certainly didn't have the rigid bearing of a brotherhood of steel soldier. He was an anomaly, a walking, talking question mark, and Piper's entire existence was dedicated to finding the answers. "I think you and I have a lot to talk about," she repeated, her voice cutting through the settlers' reverent whispers. She took a step forward, her notepad held like a shield. Her eyes narrowed with professional focus. That was unconventional, and that's putting it mildly. Where did you learn to fight like that? Who are you, really? Naruto turned his full attention to her. He met her intense, interrogative gaze with a calm, disarming smile that seemed to momentarily short-circuit her train of thought. It was a genuine smile, not the practiced smirk of a con man, but one that reached his impossibly blue eyes. I told you, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and I learned to fight a long, long time ago, in a place very different from this one. Different how? She pressed, already scribbling in her notepad. You from some pre-war vault we don't know about. Some hidden community with its own martial arts. You could say that, Naruto replied, his gaze drifting towards the horizon. A flicker of profound sadness in his eyes that was gone as quickly as it appeared. It was a hidden village. The grizzled old man who had spoken before, a man named Jed, cleared his throat. Ma'am, maybe we can give the man a moment to breathe. He just saved all our hides. He turned to Naruto, his expression deeply earnest. We don't have much, stranger. But what we have is yours. Water, some roasted mole rat. Quote, Naruto's smile returned, this time tinged with gentle gratitude. Thank you. I appreciate the offer. But right now, he looked back at Piper, I think this young lady is about to burst if she doesn't get her questions answered. Piper flushed slightly, a rare event. I'm a reporter. It's my job to be curious. Especially when someone who looks like Deju. She stepped out of a comic book single-handedly takes down a dozen armed-to-the-teeth psychos. Comic book. Naruto tilted his head, the term unfamiliar. Never mind. Look, we can't talk here. It's not safe. More raiders will be back. Or worse. We need to go, Piper stated, her tone shifting from inquisitive to authoritative. My home base is in Diamond City. It's the biggest settlement in this part of the Commonwealth. Well, it's safer than out here, anyway. You come with me, I'll get you answers, you'll get a hot meal, and I'll get the scoop of the century. Naruto considered her proposition. Diamond City. The name sounded promising, a speck of light in this endless gloom. He was operating with zero information, and this woman, with her relentless energy and her notepad, seemed to be a walking repository of it. Besides, a deeper instinct was at play. He could sense no malice from her, only an overwhelming, almost frantic, curiosity. And beneath that, a bedrock of fierce determination that he recognized. For it mirrored his own. All right, Piper Wright, he said, the name rolling off his tongue with a strange familiarity. You've got a deal. Lead the way. The journey to Diamond City was an education. The 5-mile trek, which would have been a trivial matter for him in his own time, was a slow, cautious crawl through a landscape littered with death traps. Piper, despite her non-combatant appearance, moved with the practiced vigilance of a true survivor. She pointed out the telltale signs of landmines, the shimmer of a tripwire, and the unnatural stillness that often preceded an ambush by feral ghouls. Naruto, for his part, absorbed it all with an unnerving calm. His senses, though hampered by the world's tainted natural energy, were still leagues beyond a normal human's. He would often stop, holding up a hand for silence, moments before a pack of vicious, mutated dogs would crest a nearby hill. The first time it happened, Piper had drawn her pipe pistol, her knuckles white. Naruto had simply picked up a rusted piece of rebar, and with a flick of his wrist, sent it spinning through the air. It struck the lead mongrel with a sickening thud, and the rest of the pack scattered, yelping in fear. Piper had stared, wide-eyed, from the dead dog to the seemingly casual Naruto, and had made another frantic note in her pad. Their conversations along the way were a strange dance of exposition and evasion. So, radiation, Naruto said, gesturing to the landscape. That's what this wrongness in the air is. It comes from the bombs. The Great War, Piper confirmed, her voice grim. 200 years ago, they say the whole world burned in 2 hours. The radiation is what's left. It'll kill you slow and painful if you get too much. Makes the ghouls, mutates the animals. We carry Rad-X and Radaway to fight it. You don't seem too bothered by it. My body heals quickly, Naruto said, which was a massive understatement. He could feel Kurama's chakra, a slow, steady trickle, constantly repairing the minor damage the ambient radiation was causing. It was a drain, but a manageable one. And the caps? He asked later, picking up a small, metal bottle cap from the dirt. You use these for money. Quote. Piper laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Yep, Nuka-Cola bottle caps. After the bombs fell, the old money was useless. For a while, people just bartered. But the bottle caps were hard to counterfeit. Plentiful but not infinite. So, they became the currency of the Commonwealth. Welcome to our grand economic system. He, in turn, was peppered with her questions. So this, hidden village, of yours. Did everyone fight like you? We had to, he answered truthfully. It was a dangerous time. We called ourselves shinobi, warriors of the shadows, I guess you could say. Shinobi, she repeated, tasting the word. And what about the glowing hands thing? The way you took out that raider boss. He had used a gentle pulse of chakra to his nerve cluster, a basic technique, but to her, it was magic, a shinobi technique. We use an internal energy. We call it chakra. Chakra, she scribbled. Right, internal energy. So you're saying you're some kind of pre-war ninja wizard. The skepticism was thick in her voice, but it was warring with the evidence of her own eyes. I'm saying I'm a long way from home, he replied softly, and the conversation lulled. Finally, after hours of walking, she pointed. There it is, the great green jewel of the Commonwealth. Naruto looked, and for the first time since waking, he felt a genuine sense of wonder. Rising from the ruins of what looked like an ancient, massive stadium was a city. High, patchwork walls of corrugated metal, reinforced with scavenged cars and concrete blocks, encircled the structure. Atop the walls, guards patrolled with laser rifles, their silhouettes sharp against the sickly yellow sky. It was a fortress, a bastion against the horrors of the wasteland. As they approached the main gate, a massive, jury-rigged door of steel, the sounds and smells of civilization washed over him. The murmur of dozens of voices, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the sizzle of cooking food, and the underlying stench of unwashed bodies and stagnant water. It was chaotic, it was dirty, but it was alive. The gate groaned open, and a man in a worn trench coat and a fedora stepped out, flanked by two heavily armed guards. He had a politician's practiced smile plastered on his face, but Naruto's senses immediately picked up on the discord beneath it. A frantic, buzzing anxiety and a thread of cold, calculated deception. Piper, the man boomed, spreading his arms wide. Always a pleasure. And who is this colorful new friend of yours? His eyes swept over Naruto, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. Mayor McDonough, Piper said, her voice tight. This is Naruto. He's a traveler. I'm showing him the city. A traveler, you say? McDonough's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, any friend of Piper's is a person of interest in Diamond City. We have to be careful, you understand. The Institute is always watching. Since trying to infiltrate, replace good, honest people. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We have a simple test, for newcomers. A simple question to ensure you are who you say you are. Just to prove you're human. Naruto felt a spike of alarm from Piper. A wave of indignation and fear. He looked at the mayor, this man reeking of falsehood, and understood. This was a test of conformity, a tool of control. He offered the mayor another one of his disarming smiles. There's no need, Naruto said, his voice pleasant but firm. I can assure you, I'm quite human. Though I'm not sure what a synth is, it sounds unpleasant. He let his gaze drift to the guards. Then back to the mayor. And I'm sure a city as great as this one has better ways of welcoming a potential new customer for its shops than with accusations at the gate. McDonough was taken aback. He was used to fear, or defiance, not this serene self-assurance. He faltered for a moment, his political mask slipping. Well, it's just procedure. Of course, Naruto said smoothly, stepping past him as if he'd been invited. And now that the procedure is taken care of, Piper was just about to show me the market. I'm told I can get a good bowl of noodles here. He walked into the city, leaving a stunned mayor and two confused guards in his wake. Piper hurried to catch up, a grin spreading across her face. Holy hell, she whispered, I have never seen anyone shut him down like that. He usually has people stammering and sweating. He was lying, Naruto said simply, his eyes scanning the bustling marketplace. About almost everything. His smile, his concern, it was a mask. I don't like people who wear masks they don't have to. The city was a sensory overload. A central field of brownish-green grass, with white lines still faintly visible, was Sioux. Rounded by a multi-leveled warren of shops and homes built into the stadium's seating. The air was thick with the smell of Takahashi's noodle stand, the sweat of laborers, and the faint, antiseptic scent of a doctor's office. People of all stripes milled about. Grizzled scavengers, clean-cut merchants, and rough-looking security guards. And they all stared at Naruto. His bright clothes and forehead looks made him stick out like a sore thumb. He felt their gazes, a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and fear. It was not unlike being a Jinchuriki in his youth, and he met their stares without flinching. Piper led him through the crowded paths to a small, unassuming building with a sign that read, "Public Occurrences." The inside was even more chaotic than the city outside. Stacks of newspapers, some printed, some half-written, covered every available surface. A large, humming terminal sat on a desk, its screen glowing with green text. A single, bare mattress was shoved into a corner, and the whole place smelled of ink, old paper, and stale coffee. This was Piper's sanctuary, her castle and her command center. "Make yourself at home," she said, clearing a stack of papers from a rickety chair. "Don't touch anything. Or do. I don't know. I've never had a guest." She sat at her terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Okay, let's get this down before I forget the details. So, Shinobi, Shinobi, and chakra. You said it's internal energy. How do you access it? Is it genetic? Can anyone learn it?" Naruto sat, observing her frantic energy with an amused patience. "It's complicated. It requires training, a lifetime of it, and a certain potential." She spun around in her chair to face him, her expression deadly serious. "Naruto, I need you to be straight with me. No more riddles about hidden villages and internal energy. What I saw out there wasn't just some fancy martial art. You moved faster than I could track. You threw that rebar like it was a spear. Why? Oh, you knocked out a man twice your size with a tap. Are you a mutant? Some kind of fev subject? Because if you are, I need to know." He met her gaze, and he saw the fear behind the reporter's bravado. The fear of the unknown. The fear that he was just another monster in a world full of them. He decided, in that moment, to give her a piece of the truth. Not all of it, she wasn't ready for that, but enough. "I am not a mutant," he said, his voice low and steady. "I am human, but I am not from your time. The place I was sealed, it preserved me. I believe I am from before your great war." Piper's mouth opened, then closed. She stared at him, her brain trying to process the sheer impossibility of what he was suggesting. Before the war. That's insane. No one survived. Not outside a vault. "I did," he said simply. "And the world I came from, we had abilities that you would consider magic. The use of chakra was as common to a shinobi as the use of that," he nodded to her pistol, "is to one of your guards." She leaned back, her mind reeling. It was the most ridiculous, outlandish story she had ever heard. But it was also the only one that fit the facts. It explained his ignorance of their world, his strange clothes, his impossible abilities. "So you're a 200-year-old ninja," she finally breathed, the words sounding absurd even to her. "I suppose that's one way to put it," he said with a wry smile. Before she could formulate the 1,000 other questions that were now exploding in her mind, she seemed to remember her original purpose. Her expression hardened, her focus shifting back to the present. "Okay," she said, her voice dropping. "Okay, a pre-war ninja. I'll file that away for later. Because right now, I need your help. You saw Mayor McDonough. You said he was lying. You have no idea." She turned back to her terminal and pulled up a file. It was a web of connections, a list of names, dates, and inconsistencies. "McDonough, he's too perfect, too smooth. He says all the right things about the Institute, about security. But things don't add up. People who publicly disagree with him have a habit of disappearing. Caravans with supplies he's personal. Lee approved get raided, an hour out of the city. He's corrupt, I know it. But I can't prove it. No one can get close to him. His office is under 24/7 guard. She looked at him, her eyes pleading. But you're different. You can do things other people can't. You notice things. You could get in there. Find something, anything, that I can use to expose him. Naruto listened, his expression serious. This was familiar territory. Corruption, deception, leaders who preyed on the fears of their people. He had dealt with it all before. And he saw in Piper a burning desire for the truth, a passion for justice that he deeply respected. She wasn't just looking for a story, she was trying to protect her home. You want me to infiltrate the office of your city's leader, based on your suspicion, to find proof of his corruption? He summarized. Yes, she said, her jaw set. He was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled. When do we start? That night, under the pale glow of the Commonwealth moon, filtering through the stadium's broken dome, Diamond City slept. The bustling market was quiet, the shops shuttered. Only the guards on the walls and the low hum of generators broke the silence. Yuto and Piper stood in the shadows of an alleyway across from the mayor's office. Two guards stood at attention by the door, their laser rifles held loosely. They changed shifts in 10 minutes, Piper whispered, her breath fogging in the cool air. There's a window on the second floor, but it's always locked. Naruto didn't answer. He was closing his eyes, focusing. He extended his senses, feeling the flow of the city. The guards' heartbeats were steady, bored. Inside the office, silence. He reached out with a sliver of his chakra, a delicate, probing thread of energy. He touched the lock on the window Piper had mentioned. It was a simple tumbler lock, old and slightly rusted. The window won't be a problem, he murmured. The problem is getting up there without being seen. He looked at Piper. I need a distraction. Something loud, but not alarming enough to cause a full lockdown. Something to draw those guards away from the door for 30 seconds. Piper's eyes lit up. Nat, my sister. She's a kid. But she's a handful, and she loves to play pranks. A few minutes later, a blood-curdling shriek echoed from the direction of the noodle stand, followed by a loud crash of metal pots. My cabbages, a robotic voice yelled. The two guards at the mayor's office exchanged a look, sighed, and jogged off to investigate the commotion. That's my cue, Piper whispered. But Naruto was already gone. Piper blinked, and the spot where he had been standing was empty. She looked up, her heart in her throat, and saw a dark shape flow up the wall of the building with the silent, fluid grace of a spider. He reached the second-story window, and for a second, a faint blue light emanated from his fingertips as he touched the lock. A soft click echoed in the quiet night, and the window slid open. He slipped inside without a sound. 30 seconds later, the guards returned, grumbling about kids and rogue iBots. They retook their post, oblivious. Piper held her breath, her eyes glued to the dark window. Inside, Naruto moved through the mayor's office like a phantom. It was opulent by Wasteland standards, with a large wooden desk, leather chairs, and shelves of pre-war books. He didn't turn on a light, his eyes having already adjusted to the gloom. He trusted his senses more than his sight anyway. He could feel the cold, sterile energy of the computer terminal on the desk. He could smell the faint, cloying scent of cheap cologne. He let his fingers drift over the desk, the walls, the floor. He was looking for discrepancies, for anything out of place. His search was not random. He was sensing for the subtle disturbances that came with hidden compartments or loose floorboards. Under the desk, his fingers brushed against a small, almost invisible seam in the wood. He pressed it, and a hidden panel slid open. Inside was a small, metal box. It wasn't locked. He opened it. It contained a syringe of a strange, milky white fluid, and a small holotape. He pocketed both. His primary target, however, was the terminal. He suspected the real evidence would be there. He touched the screen. It flickered to life, demanding a password. He closed his eyes again, placing his palm flat against the screen. This was a long shot. He had no idea if it would work on this technology. He focused his chakra, not as a blunt instrument, but as a key, a probe. He tried to feel the flow of energy within the machine, to find the pathway of the security protocol, and to overwhelm it with a pulse of his own energy. The screen flickered, displaying lines of corrupted text, then went black. For a moment, he thought he'd broken it. But then, It flickered back on, this time displaying the main desktop. No password required. He had bypassed it. He quickly navigated the files. Most were mundane city business. Budgets, guard schedules, trade agreements. But in a deeply buried, password-protected directory, which the system now ignored, he found it. A series of audio logs. He played the most recent one. McDonough's voice filled the silent room, but it was strained, terrified. He's getting impatient. The reports aren't enough anymore. He wants a foothold. He says the asset in Goodneighbor is secured. And now he wants Diamond City. He told me if I don't speed up the process, they'll retire me. Oh, God, I never should have made this deal. The next file wasn't an audio log. It was a single, chilling text file. A report. Subject: Mayor McDonough, M7 to 62. Performance review. Conclusion. Subject is exhibiting signs of emotional instability and compromised loyalty. His usefulness has reached its end. Initiate replacement protocol. Unit Z247 is prepped and ready for insertion. Eliminate the original. Father. Naruto's blood ran cold. Replacement protocol. M762. Father. He finally understood. Piper wasn't just right about the corruption. She was wrong about the target. The man downstairs, the man who had greeted them at the gate, was not Mayor McDonough. He was the replacement. He was a synth. He copied the files onto the holotape he'd found, his movements swift and precise. He then slipped back to the window, opened it, and dropped to the ground as silently as he had ascended. He materialized in the alley next to a trembling Piper. He handed her the holotape. "You were right," he said, his voice grim. "And you were wrong. It's much worse than you think." They hurried back to the sanctuary of public occurrences. Piper slammed the holotape into her terminal, her hands shaking as she put on a pair of headphones. She listened, her face growing paler with every word. She read the final report, and a strangled sob escaped her lips. "So the real McDonough, he's gone," she whispered, looking up at Naruto, her eyes wide with horror and a new, steely resolve. "They replaced him. The Institute. They're already here." Naruto nodded, his expression grim. "The man at the gate is a machine, an imposter. This is the conspiracy you were looking for." Piper stood up, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "We have to show this to someone. Security. We have to expose him. And who will they believe?" Naruto countered, his voice cutting through her panic. "You, the radical reporter with a grudge. Or their smooth-talking mayor. He'll call the holotape a fabrication. He'll call me a synth agent and you his accomplice. He'll turn the city against you. So what do we do?" She cried, her voice cracking. "We just let him win. Let the Institute take over our city from the inside." "No," Naruto said, and he stepped towards her, his presence filling the small room. A sudden island of unshakable calm in her sea of panic. "We don't let him win. We just change the rules of the game." He looked at her, and in his blue eyes, she saw not the playful stranger from before, but the calculating gaze of a seasoned leader, a cage. He wants to play with shadows and lies. But he's about to find out that the shadows are where I live. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Combat Zone. The air in the cramped office of public occurrences was thick with the scent of old paper, ozone from the terminal, and the new, heavy weight of revelation. Piper Wright paced the narrow floor space. Her movements sharp and agitated, a caged predator whose cage had just been revealed to be a shoebox. The holotape sat on her desk, a tiny, innocuous rectangle that held enough political explosive to level Diamond City's fragile social structure. "We can't just sit on this," she said, for the fourth time in as many minutes. Her voice was a frayed wire, stray. TCHED between journalistic outrage and raw, personal fear. The city she had fought for, the truth she had dedicated her life to uncovering, was a lie orchestrated by a machine in a man's skin. Every minute that thing sits in the mayor's office, the Institute sinks its claws deeper into my home. Naruto sat calmly in the rickety chair she had cleared for him, his presence a stark contrast to her frantic energy. He was a stone in the middle of a rushing river, unmoving, his gaze fixed on the holotape. He understood her urgency, felt the righteous anger thrumming from her, but his mind, Ned by decades of leadership and warfare, was already several steps ahead, mapping the treacherous terrain of their new reality. Panic is a weapon, Piper, he said, his voice low and steady, cutting through her anxiety. And right now, it's a weapon he can use against us. You said it yourself. Who would they believe? We have one piece of evidence. He has the trust of an entire city. If we make a move now, we'll be crushed before we even start. So we do nothing, she demanded, whirling to face him. We let them get away with it. The real McDonough is probably dead, Naruto. Don't you care? Caring isn't the issue, he countered, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her pause. Effectiveness is. Rushing into a fortress head-on is not brave, it's foolish. We need a better plan. We need more information. We need leverage. He tapped a finger on the desk, next to the holotape. And this tape gave us our first piece. Piper's brow furrowed. She replayed the tinny, tariff, IED voice of the real McDonough in her head. The asset in Goodneighbor is secured. Her eyes widened in comprehension. Goodneighbor. The name hung in the air between them, tasting of rust and cheap whiskey. Goodneighbor was everything Diamond City pretended not to be. It was the Commonwealth's festering, unapologetic id. A town run by criminals, for criminals, populated by ghouls, mercs, and outcasts who couldn't or wouldn't live under the strict, paranoid rule of the Great Green Jewel. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and utterly without law, save for the single, ironclad rule of its self-appointed mayor. A charismatic ghoul named Hancock. Don't tread on me. You want to go to Goodneighbor. Piper's voice was incredulous. Naruto, it's not like Diamond City. There's no security, no walls to hide behind. It's a pit. We'd be walking into the lion's den. The lion's den is where you find the other lions, he replied, a faint, predatory smile touching his lips. The Institute has an asset there. That means they have a weakness there. An operation. A loose thread. If we can find it, if we can pull on it, the whole tapestry might unravel. We learn their methods, their network. We fight them in the shadows. Remember, their shadows reach all the way to Goodneighbor. His logic was sound, his confidence infectious. Piper felt her own fear being pushed aside by a fresh surge of determination. He was right. Hiding in Diamond City was a losing battle. They had to go on the offensive. Chasing this lead was the only move they had. All right, she said, taking a deep breath and grabbing her worn leather satchel. All right, we go to Goodneighbor, but we do this my way. Quietly. No grand entrances, no picking fights. We go in, we ask around, we find this asset, and we get out. Naruto nodded, a glint of amusement in his eyes. Of course, Piper. Quiet as a mouse. The journey from Diamond City's orderly paranoia to the anarchic squalor of Goodneighbor was a descent. The wasteland between the two settlements was a choked ruin of collapsed highways and skeletal office buildings. They moved through the broken world, a study in contrasts. Piper, with her pipe pistol clutched tight, pointed out the dangers with hushed, urgent warnings, her knowledge born of fear and repetition. Naruto moved with a preternatural awareness, his senses a constant, silent hum. He'd S.P.O.T. a feral ghoul playing dead in a pile of rubble long before it could lunge, or sense the weakness in a rusted catwalk just before Piper put her weight on it. He didn't just see the dangers, he felt them. As if the world itself was whispering its secrets to him. After an hour of tense trekking, the distinctive silhouette of the old state house rose before them, its golden dome tarnished but intact. Nestled in the ruins at its base was Goodneighbor. There was no grand gate, no checkpoint. The entrance was a simple, arched tunnel, at the end of which a garish, neon sign blinked the town's name in flickering red letters. The air itself seemed to change as they approached, growing heavier, thick with the smells of stale beer, chem smoke, and desperation. A man in a threadbare suit and a grimy bowler hat intercepted them just inside the tunnel. Whoa there, slow down. You ain't from around here, I can tell. First time in Goodneighbor. Before Piper could launch into a carefully crafted cover story, Naruto stepped forward. His expression open and friendly. That obvious, huh, we're just looking for a drink and maybe some information. Heard this was the place for both. The man, whose name was Finn, grinned, revealing a set of stained teeth. You heard right, but in Goodneighbor, everything's got a price. Even directions. How about a little insurance? For your protection, you understand. He held out a hand, palm up. Piper bristled, her hand tightening on her pistol. This was the kind of shakedown she'd expected. But Naruto simply laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed out of place in the grimy tunnel. "Protection?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. "Friend, I think we'll be just fine. But I appreciate the offer." He clapped a hand on Finn's shoulder, a gesture that was both friendly and undeniably firm. For a split second, Finn felt a jolt of energy, a surge of warmth that made the hairs on his arms stand up, and he saw a flash of something ancient and powerful in the stranger's blue eyes. He took an involuntary step back, his bravado deflating like a punctured tire. "Right, yeah, sure," Finn stammered, rubbing his shoulder. "Just watch your back." He scurried off into the gloom of the town. Piper stared at Naruto. "What did you do?" "I was friendly," Naruto said with a shrug. "Sometimes, that's all it takes." They stepped out of the tunnel and into Goodneighbor proper. It was a single, sprawling street, hemmed in by ruined buildings that had been converted into shops, bars, and flophouses. Ghouls and humans mingled freely, their faces hard and wary. Mercenaries with heavy weapons leaned against walls, their eyes missing nothing. The only source of light came from garish neon signs and fires burning in rusted barrels. The whole place felt like a powder keg, and everyone had a lit match. "Okay," Piper whispered, pulling her coat tighter around herself. "Where do we even start? We can't just walk up to people and ask if they're an institute asset." Naruto's gaze swept the street, taking in the flow of people, the hushed conversations, the furtive glances. He was looking for a nexus, a center of gravity in this chaotic little world. And he found it. A building down the street, louder and more crowded than any other. A flashing sign above the door depicted two stick figures locked in combat. The sound pouring from its entrance was a roar, the roar of a crowd. Primal and bloodthirsty. "There," Naruto said, pointing. "When people want to talk, they go to a bar. When they want to lose themselves, they go to a place like that. Secrets are spilled in both. Let's start there." The sign read, "The Combat Zone." The moment they stepped inside, they were hit by a wall of sound and stench. The air was a suffocating mix of sweat, blood, stale alcohol, and the sharp, chemical tang of psycho. The room was circular, dominated by a large, chain-linked cage in the center, stained dark with blood and God knows what else. A raucous crowd of raiders, mercs, and lowlifes were packed around it, screaming, cheering, and throwing caps into the arena. Inside the cage, two men were beating each other senseless. It was sloppy, brutal, and artless. A man in a clean, if somewhat worn, suit stood on a small platform, acting as an announcer. And another vicious Wright from Killer Malone. "Looks like Jimmy the Guts is about to spill his famous guts all over the canvas, folks." Piper looked ill. "This is disgusting. It's a slaughterhouse. It's a part of this world," Naruto said, his face unreadable as he scanned the crowd, his senses sifting through the chaos. "They have nothing else, so they pay to watch others fight. It makes them feel alive." They found a small, relatively clean spot at the bar, which was run by a nervous-looking man who introduced himself as Tommy Lanagan. He was also the owner and the announcer. "What'll it be?" Tommy asked, his eyes darting nervously towards the cage. "Just information," Piper said, leaning forward. "We're looking for someone, maybe an outsider, someone who keeps to themselves, but has resources." Tommy laughed, a short, humorless bark. "Lady, you just described half the people in this room, and the other half want to rob 'em. You gotta be more specific." Before she could press, a roar went up from the crowd, louder than before. The fight was over. One man was being dragged out by his feet, leaving a bloody smear on the floor. The victor, Killer Malone, raised his arms, but the crowd was already chanting a different name. "Kate, Kate, Kate." Tommy Lanagan sighed, a look of weary resignation on his face. "All right, folks, settle down. You wanted the main event, you've got it. Your champion, the undisputed Queen of Carnage, the brawling beauty from an Irish slum, give it up for Kate." The door to a back room slammed open and she strode out, a whirlwind of furious energy. She was tall, athletic, with fiery red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore scavenged leather and metal plates, and her knuckles were wrapped in bloody tape. But it was her eyes that captured Naruto's attention. They were a piercing green, blazing with a self-destructive fire. He could see the faint sheen of sweat on her brow, the slight tremor in her hands, the unnaturally dilated pupils. She was high, amped up on psycho. Her opponent was a hulking brute of a man, easily twice her size, with a power fist crackling on one hand. The crowd roared their approval. Kate just spat on the ground, vaulted over the ropes, and entered the cage. She gave the crowd a feral grin, a flash of white teeth in a grime-streaked face. The bell rang, and the brute charged. He swung the power fist in a wide, clumsy arc, expecting to end the fight in a single blow. But Kate was a blur of motion. She ducked under the swing, her body moving with a liquid grace that was at odds with her brawler's appearance. She slammed her elbow into the back of his knee, buckling his leg. As he stumbled, she drove her fist into his kidney, then a brutal uppercut to his jaw that snapped his head back. The fight was short, savage, and ruthlessly efficient. She didn't just beat him, she dismantled him. She used her speed and agility to stay out of his reach, peppering him with precise, punishing blows. She fought with a desperate, cornered animal ferocity that was both terrifying and mesmerizing to watch. Finally, with he giant wheezing and barely able to stand, she ran, jumped, and used the chain-link fence as a springboard, launching herself into a devastating knee strike that sent the brute crashing to the mat, unconscious. The crowd exploded. Caps rained down into the cage. Kate stood over her fallen opponent, chest heaving, her green eyes blazing with triumph and the chemical fire of the chems. She looked wild, magnificent, and utterly broken. Naruto watched her, his expression unreadable. He saw past the swagger, past the violence. He saw the pain that fueled her rage, the hollowness behind the victory. He saw a skilled warrior systematically destroying herself, one fight, one hit at a time. It was a terrible waste. Kate collected her winnings from a grim-faced Tommy, then swaggered over to the bar, shoving people out of her way. She slammed a blood-stained fistful of caps on the counter. "Whiskey," she rasped, her voice a low, gravelly alto with a distinct Irish lilt. Tommy slid her a dirty glass and a bottle. She took a long swig directly from the bottle, her eyes scanning the bar with a defiant glare. Her gaze fell on Naruto and Piper. "What are you two gawkin' at? Never seen a real fight before." Piper, ever the journalist, saw her opening. "That was impressive. My name is Piper. We were just. I don't give a rat's ass who you are," Kate sneered, cutting her off. "If you ain't here to fight or buy me a drink, piss off." Quote. Naruto met her glare with a calm, steady gaze. "It was impressive," he agreed, his voice cutting through the bar's din. "You're fast, you're strong, and you read your opponent well. But your technique is sloppy. You rely too much on rage. And your body is paying the price." Kate froze, the bottle halfway to her lips. She slowly turned to face him, a dangerous light entering her eyes. "And what would a pretty boy in a ridiculous orange coat know about fighting?" "More than you think," Naruto said simply. "I know that the high you're chasing right now is dulling your senses, not sharpening them. I know that you're winning these fights on muscle memory and raw talent, but one day, that won't be enough. One day, you'll be a split second too slow, and you'll end up like that lump on the floor. Or worse." The area around the bar went quiet. Everyone could feel the sudden, dangerous shift in the atmosphere. Kate placed the bottle down with a soft click. She looked him up and down, a contemptuous smirk on her face. "You think you're better than me?" she challenged, her voice low and menacing. "You think you could last 10 seconds in that cage?" "Yes," Naruto answered, without a trace of arrogance. It was a simple statement of fact. Kate laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You've got balls, I'll give you that. Or you're just plain stupid." She leaned in, her face inches from his, the smell of whiskey and chems on her breath. "All right, pretty boy, you want to prove it? Let's make a deal, you and me, in the cage, no weapons. If you win, I'll listen to your bloody lecture." "And if you win?" Naruto asked. Kate's smirk widened. "If I win, you and your little friend here give me every cap you have, and then you get the hell out of my town and never come back." She turned to Tommy Lanagan, who looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "Tommy, we got another fight. This one's personal." Piper grabbed Naruto's arm. "Naruto, no, Are you insane? She'll kill you. She won't, Naruto said, his eyes never leaving Kate's. He saw the challenge, but he also saw the desperate plea for help hidden beneath it, a cry for someone, anyone, to break the cycle she was trapped in. He gave Piper's hand a reassuring squeeze. Trust me. He turned back to Kate. I have a better offer. If you win, you get our caps, and we leave. But if I win, he paused, letting the tension build. You come with us, and you let me help you get clean. Kate stared at him, her bravado faltering for a fraction of a second. He wasn't challenging her pride. He was challenging her addiction. No one had ever done that. They either wanted to use her, bet on her, or sleep with her. No one had ever offered to help her. The very idea was so foreign it scared her more than any opponent in the cage. Done, she spat, recovering her composure. It'll be a pleasure to beat the self-righteous crap out of you. A few minutes later, Naruto was standing inside the cage. The door was locked behind him. The crowd was in a frenzy, the scent of blood and an upset driving them wild. They were all betting against the strange newcomer in the orange coat. Piper stood by the edge of the cage, her face pale with worry. Naruto took a deep breath, centering himself. He could feel the tainted energy of the world around him, but he ignored it. He reached inside, to the familiar, warm river of his own chakra, and let a small amount flow through his body, sharpening his senses, preparing his muscles. He didn't need a Rasengan. He didn't need Sage Mode. For this, his taijutsu, the pure art of physical combat, would be more than enough. Kate entered the cage opposite him, rolling her shoulders. She had taken another hit of Psycho, her eyes burning with an even brighter, more manic intensity. The bell rang. She exploded from her corner, a red-headed missile of pure aggression. She didn't faint, didn't test him. She went straight for the kill, launching a furious combination of punches and kicks. Her movements were a blur to the average person, but to Naruto, they were happening in slow motion. He didn't retreat. He didn't block. He simply moved. He swayed to the left, her fist whistling past his ear. He ducked, a roundhouse kick sailing over his head. He stepped inside her guard, her elbow strike glancing off his shoulder. He moved with an effortless, impossible grace, using the bare minimum of motion to avoid her onslaught. He was an untouchable ghost, a leaf on the wind, and she was punching at air. The crowd, which had been cheering for her, slowly fell silent. They were witnessing something they couldn't comprehend. It wasn't a fight, it was an art form. Kate roared in frustration, her attacks becoming wilder, more desperate. The Psycho was making her stronger, but it was also making her sloppy. She was burning through her energy at a ferocious rate. Sweat poured down her face, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Stand and fight, you coward, she screamed, lunging at him. This time, Naruto didn't dodge. He met her lunge, but not with force. He caught her outstretched arm, his fingers gently but firmly gripping her wrist. He used her own momentum, her forward charge, to spin her around, redirecting her entire body as if she weighed nothing. She stumbled, off balance, and he was there, not to strike, but to guide her. He swept her leg from under her, and as she fell, he caught her, softening her landing so she didn't crack her head on the mat. He stood over her, his expression not of triumph, but of pity. It's over, Kate, she scrambled to her feet, her eyes wild with fury and shame. It's not over, she charged again, throwing a haymaker with all her remaining strength. Naruto sighed. He sidestepped the punch, and in one fluid motion, he tapped 2 fingers against her neck and a spot on her shoulder. It was a gentle touch, almost casual. But Kate's body went rigid. Her eyes widened in shock as her arms and legs suddenly refused to obey her commands. She was paralyzed, locked in place, completely at his mercy. He had used a precise, low-level chakra pulse to temporarily disrupt the nerve signals to her limbs. He leaned in close, his voice a soft murmur only she could hear. You are a magnificent fighter, a warrior, but you are fighting the wrong enemy. The Psycho, the Rage, that is your opponent. Not me, and it's a fight you are losing. Let me help you win it. He released the nerve lock. The strength rushed out of her limbs, and she collapsed to her knees, the combined exhaustion of the fight and the crass from the Psycho hitting her all at once. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a raw, naked vulnerability. Tears of frustration and shame welled up, tracing clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. The combat zone was utterly silent. The only sound was Kate's ragged breathing. Naruto extended a hand to her. She looked at his hand, then up at his face. She saw no mockery, no pity, only a calm, unwavering sincerity. He had beaten her, humiliated her in front of her crowd, but he had done it without causing her any real harm. He had shown her a level of skill, a level of control she didn't know was possible. He had seen the broken thing inside her, and instead of exploiting it, he had offered to help fix it. Slowly, hesitantly, she took his hand. His grip was warm and strong. He pulled her to her feet. The deal was done. Naruto turned to the stunned crowd and the equally stunned Tommy Lanagan. "The fight is over," he announced, his voice ringing with quiet authority. "She's with us now." He led a dazed Kate out of the cage. Piper rushed to them, her face a mixture of relief and utter astonishment. I don't believe it. We have what we came for," Naruto said, his gaze softening as he looked at the trembling woman beside him. "And something more." Later, after a tense negotiation with Tommy Lanagan, who, after witnessing the fight, was suddenly very eager to cooperate, they had their lead. The Institute, asset, wasn't a person, but a drop point. A specific, pre-war safe in the back office of the Memory Den, a place where people went to relive old memories using advanced technology. It was another thread, leading them deeper into the web. As the three of them prepared to leave the combat zone, Kate, now sober and sullen, finally spoke to Naruto. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would you help me? What do you get out of it?" Naruto looked at her, and his smile was gentle. "I get to see a good fighter not throw her life away. In the world I come from, we didn't have many warriors to spare. We couldn't afford to lose a single one. It's a hard habit to break." He turned and walked towards the exit, Piper at his side. Kate stood for a moment, watching him go. He was an enigma, a puzzle she couldn't solve. But as she followed him out into the grimy, neon-lit streets of Goodneighbor, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. A tiny, fragile flicker of hope. Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Secret of Vault 81. The walk away from the combat zone was a strange, silent procession. Naruto led, his posture relaxed but alert, a silent anchor in the chaotic sea of Goodneighbor. Piper walked beside him, her mind a whirlwind, trying to reconcile the gentle, smiling man who had offered a hand to a broken fighter with the Superna Turtle warrior who had dismantled her without throwing a single punch. And behind them, trailing like a reluctant shadow, was Kate. The chemical fire of the psycho had burned out, leaving behind the cold, gray ash of withdrawal. Every nerve in her body screamed. A cold sweat slicked her skin, and a tremor she couldn't control ran through her hands. The usual, gnawing craving was a physical presence in her gut. A hungry beast demanding to be fed. She was irritable, raw, and wrapped in a shroud of humiliation. To be beaten was one thing, she'd been beaten before. But to be so effortlessly dismantled and then, pitied. It was a new and exquisitely painful experience. Her gaze was fixed on the back of Naruto's ridiculous orange coat. Part of her wanted to shiv him in the kidneys and run. Another, smaller, more confusing part of her felt a flicker of something she couldn't name. He hadn't hurt her. He had called her a warrior. He had offered to help. The words echoed in the screaming silence of her mind. A dissonant chord in the familiar symphony of her self-loathing. Their destination was the Memory Den, a haven of nostalgia and escapism nestled in the heart of Goodneighbor's squalor. The entrance was marked by a flickering neon sign promising a trip to a better time. Inside, the air was heavy with incense and the low, hypnotic hum of machinery. Patrons lay reclined in strange, pod-like chairs, metallic headgear covering their eyes, their faces slack with induced reverie. A tall, elegant ghoul with sharp, intelligent eyes and a pre-war dress that had seen better centuries stood behind a counter, observing the scene with an air of detached amusement. This was Irma, the proprietor. "Welcome to the Memory Den," she said, her voice a smooth, smoky contralto. "Here to forget the rubles of today by reliving the troubles of yesterday. Or perhaps you're looking for something custom." Her eyes lingered on Naruto, a flicker of professional curiosity in their depths. We're not customers, Piper said, stepping forward. Taking the lead. We're following a lead. We were told there's a safe in your back office. An institute drop point. Irma's practiced smile didn't waver, but a sudden coldness entered her eyes. The institute. Here, my dear, I think you've been sniffing too much jet. This is a place of business, not a den of spies. Naruto let his gaze drift around the room, past the oblivious patrons. Past Irma's carefully constructed facade. He could feel the subtle thrum of the technology, the flow of energy through the memory loungers. But beneath it, he sensed something else. A faint, lingering echo of the same cold, sterile energy he had felt from the synth mayor in Diamond City. It was faint, almost completely masked by the den's own technological signature, but it was there. The drop point was real. Your business involves pre-war technology, Naruto said, his voice calm and reasonable. The Institute is the master of that. It's not a stretch to think they'd use a place like this. A neutral ground where people come and go, no questions asked. He met Irma's gaze. We don't want to cause trouble for you. We just want what's in the safe. As he spoke, a wave of nausea washed over Kate. Her knees buckled, and she leaned against the doorframe, a low groan escaping her lips. Gods, she muttered, clutching her stomach. Feel like my guts are trying to crawl out through my throat. Naruto was at her side in an instant. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and she flinched, expecting a blow or a shove. Instead, a wave of gentle, soothing warmth spread from his hand through her entire body. It was not the fiery, artificial rush of a chem, but a deep, calming energy that seemed to unknot the twisted cables of her nerves. The shaking in her hands subsided, the nausea receded to a dull ache. It was temporary, a brief respite, but it was more relief than she had felt in years. She stared at him, bewildered. Irma watched the exchange, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She saw the state Kate was in, the genuine concern on Naruto's face, and the bizarre, instantaneous effect of his touch. These were not the usual thugs or chem-addled raiders that stumbled into her establishment. This was something different, something complicated. She let out a long, weary sigh. The things I do to keep this place running, she murmured, more to herself than to them. All right, the safe is in the back. But I want your word. Whatever you find, my name stays out of it. The memory den is neutral territory. Always has been, always will be. You have our word, Piper said quickly. Relief washing over her face. Irma led them to a small, cluttered back office. A heavy, pre-war safe was bolted to the floor in the corner. Knock yourselves out, she said, before retreating back to her front counter. Leaving the three of them alone. Well, this is a problem, Piper said, examining the safe's formidable dial lock. I'm no locksmith. This could take days to crack. Naruto knelt before the safe. He placed his palm flat against the cold steel door, closing his eyes. Piper and Kate watched, skeptical. Was he going to punch this one open too? But he remained perfectly still. He was listening, not with his ears, but with his chakra. He sent a delicate, hair-thin tendril of his energy into the lock mechanism, feeling the subtle clicks and shifts of the tumblers. It was like navigating a complex maze in the dark. He slowly turned the dial, his hand moving with an unnatural certainty, guided by the feedback only he could perceive. With a final, soft thunk, the mechanism disengaged. He opened the heavy door. Piper stared, her mouth agape. How in the hell did you do that? It's just a lock, Naruto said with a shrug, as if that explained anything. The contents of the safe were anticlimactic. No secret documents, no bag of caps. Just a single, sealed test tube containing a small sample of swirling, greenish liquid, and a small, folded piece of paper. The paper wasn't a message, but a schematic, a detailed layout of a medical laboratory. Piper held the schematic up to the dim light. This is incredibly detailed. It looks like a research facility. But these symbols, I've never seen them before. I have, a voice said from the doorway. Irma was leaning against the frame, a knowing look on her face. Those are vault tech markings. That's a blueprint for a section of a vault. Quote, which one? Naruto asked, his gaze fixed on the test tube. He could sense a strange, complex energy from the liquid within. It was biological, but also highly volatile. Irma hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. There are rumors about Vault 81, west of here. They say it's one of the few that's still sealed, still clean. They trade, sometimes, high-tech medical supplies, purer than anything you can find elsewhere. If that sample needs analyzing, that's the only place in the Commonwealth with the equipment to do it. She then looked at Kate, who was starting to tremble again as the effects of Naruto's touch wore off. And if your friend is looking for a permanent cure for her troubles, a Vault-Tech medical bay is her best, and maybe only, shot. The plan formed quickly. It was a long shot, but it was the only one they had. The Institute was clearly using Vault 81 for something related to this biological sample. And if there was even a spur of a chance that they could help Kate for good, it was a risk they had to take. The journey to Vault 81 was arduous, made more so by Kate's worsening condition. The withdrawal was hitting her full force now, a relentless storm of pain, paranoia, and violent mood swings. One moment she would be screaming at Piper, accusing her of being a synth spy, the next she would be curled on the ground, weeping. Through it all, Naruto was a pillar of patience. He never raised his voice, never judged. When the shaking became too much, he would place a hand on her shoulder and flood her system with his calming chakra. He couldn't cure her, not yet, but he could give her moments of peace, windows of clarity in the hurricane of her suffering. During one of these moments, as she sat panting, the pain having receded for a precious few minutes, she looked at him, her green eyes clear and lucid. "No one's ever done this," she whispered, her voice raw. "They just give you more chems, or lock you in a room, till the screaming stops." "That's not healing," Naruto replied softly, offering her a canteen of clean water he had purified with a simple chakra technique. "That's just waiting for the storm to pass. Sometimes, you need someone to stand in the storm with you." The gesture, the simple act of kindness in the face of her ugliness, was a crack in the fortress she had built around her heart. For the first time, she saw him not as a captor or a pretty boy, but as something else entirely. They found Vault 81 nestled in a rocky hillside, its massive, gear-shaped door a stark contrast to the surrounding wasteland. It looked pristine, untouched by the centuries of decay. A voice crackled over an intercom as they approached, polite but firm, demanding to know their business. Piper stepped up, her journalistic instincts replaced by a desperate plea. She told them about Kate, about her addiction, about their need for advanced medical help. There was a long pause. Naruto could feel the debate happening on the other side of the door. Finally, the voice returned, announcing that the overseer had agreed to let them in, but they would need to provide 3 fusion cores for the trouble, opening the door and sharing their resources. After bartering with what little they had scavenged, the massive door ground open, revealing a brightly lit, spotlessly clean tunnel. A woman in a crisp, blue vault suit, the overseer, greeted them with a welcoming but cautious smile. The interior of the vault was breathtaking. It was a complete, self-contained, pre-war town, preserved under tons of rock. The air was clean, the lights were bright, and the residents milled about with a sense of peace and security that was utterly alien to the world outside. They were led to the clinic, a sterile, well-equipped room run by a kindly but overwhelmed doctor. He examined Kate, confirming the severity of her psycho-addiction, but admitted that their treatments were limited. They could manage the symptoms, but they couldn't cure the deep-seated physiological and psychological damage. While the doctor was occupied, Naruto's senses were screaming at him. The vault was too perfect. The smiles of the residents were genuine, but underneath, he felt a current of shared anxiety, a secret fear that permeated the entire community. And he could sense a space, a part of the vault that didn't appear on the public directory. Hidden behind a solid wall. A place that hummed with a sickly energy, chillingly similar to the sample in the test tube. His suspicions were confirmed when a commotion broke out near the clinic. A young boy named Austin, the son of one of the families they had met, had gone missing. He was a curious child, known for exploring. A frantic search began. Naruto closed his eyes and extended his senses. He ignored the clamor of the main vault and focused on the hidden space he had detected. And there, amidst the sickly hum, he felt a small, frightened spark of life. The boy was in the secret section. Without a word to the others, he walked to a nondescript section of wall at the back of the clinic. He placed his hand on it, channeling a precise pulse of chakra. A low hiss answered him, and a hidden door slid open, revealing a dark, dusty corridor. He sprinted down the corridor, Piper and a now frantic Kate close behind. They emerged into a vast, secret laboratory, a stark contrast to the clean vault outside. Cages lined the walls, filled with unnaturally large, diseased-looking mole rats. In the center of the room was a single, pristine Miss Nanny robot, hovering silently over a console. Bonjour, the robot chirped, its voice a cheerful, feminine French accent. It has been 82,473 days since my last human interaction. I am designated Cur 1E. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? Before they could answer, a small cry came from behind a stack of crates. It was Austin. He had snuck in and was now cowering, a look of terror on his face. As he scrambled out, one of the mole rats, having chewed through the rusted latch on its cage, lunged out, biting the boy viciously on the leg before Naruto could intervene. Naruto dispatched the creature with a single, swift kick, but the damage was done. Austin collapsed, his leg bleeding, a strange, gray pallor already spreading from the wound. The vault's doctor rushed in, his face ashen. The mole rat disease, he whispered in horror. There's no cure. It's 100% fatal. Incorrect. Curie chirped, hovering over to the boy. My research, conducted over 2 centuries in isolation, has yielded a positive result. There is a cure, however. She turned her optical sensors to the group, her voice losing its cheerful tone for the first time. There is only one dose. It is the culmination of this vault's original, secret directive. It is priceless, meant for study and replication for the good of all humanity, not for a single subject. A terrible silence fell over the room. The doctor looked defeated. Piper looked horrified. Kate, despite her own pain, looked at the small, dying boy with a flicker of empathy. They had one dose of a miracle cure. And a choice. Naruto knelt beside Austin. He placed a hand over the wound, not touching it, and closed his eyes. Green, healing chakra emanated from his palm. He couldn't cure the disease. It was too complex, too aggressive, but he could slow it, fight it, buy the boy time. He could also feel the cure, sitting on a nearby lab table. He could sense its structure, its incredible, life-affirming energy. It was a masterpiece of medical science. He also knew, with absolute certainty, that replicating it with his current, limited knowledge of this world's chemistry would be impossible. It was one or the other. He looked at Curie. A single life is not an abstract, doctor. It is a universe. The good of all humanity is a meaningless concept if we are not willing to save one child who is right in front of us. He then looked at Kate. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. She knew what this cure could mean for her, the hope of a life free from the cravings that had defined her. He saw the struggle in her eyes, the war between her lifelong self-preservation and the new, fragile empathy she was feeling. The choice is not yours, Kate, Naruto said softly, so only she could hear. It's mine, and I won't let a child die. He focused his healing chakra on her for a moment. A stronger dose than before, giving her a moment of pure clarity and peace from the withdrawal. There are other ways to heal. I will help you, I promise. Kate looked from the boy's graying face to Naruto's, and she nodded. A single, tearful jerk of her head. Naruto stood up and faced Curie. Give me the cure. Curie's optical sensors whirred. Her programming was in conflict. Her directive was to preserve the sample. But this strange man, with his biological energy and his unassailable moral logic, presented a variable her programming couldn't account for. He was saving the boy. And he was offering an alternative path of healing for the addict. It was fascinating. Your logic is compelling, Curie stated. And your energy-based medical application is a phenomenon I must study. Very well. She floated over, picked up the syringe containing the cure, and handed it to Naruto. He took it without hesitation and administered it to Austin. The effect was immediate. The gray pallor receded, the boy's breathing eased, and the color returned to his cheeks. The crisis was over. The aftermath was a blur of gratitude from the vault dwellers and Austin's parents. The secret of Vault 81 was out, but instead of anger, there was relief. Naruto had not only saved their child but had also lanced the boil of the secret they had been living with for generations. As they prepared to leave, Curie hovered over to Naruto. My directive was to develop a cure. I have succeeded. My secondary directive is to observe and learn, to advance the cause of science for the betterment of mankind. Observing you, Major Naruto, is the most logical course of action. Your abilities, your ethics, they are a new frontier. I wish to accompany you on your journey. Naruto looked at the earnest, curious robot. She was brilliant, eccentric, and powerful in her own right. Welcome to the team, Curie, he said with a smile. They walked out of the vault, back into the harsh light of the wasteland. They were now four: Piper, the seeker of truth; Kate, the warrior on a painful path to redemption; Curie, the brilliant scientist awakening to the complexities of the world; and Naruto, the sage from another time, their leader, their protector, and the unmovable center of their strange, new family. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Glowing Sea. The relative sanctuary of Vault 81 felt a universe away. The clean, recycled air had been replaced by the familiar, gritty taste of the wasteland, and the fluorescent lighting traded for the oppressive, brassy glare of the Commonwealth sun. They had walked for hours, putting distance between themselves and the vault, the weight of their recent decisions settling upon them. Austin was alive, a singular, brilliant victory. But Kate's cure had been sacrificed, and the nature of the Institute's interest in the Vault 81 sample remained a mystery. They now had a new, and entirely unexpected, member in their group. Curie hovered alongside them, her metallic chassis glinting in the sun. Her cheerful, synthesized voice a bizarre counterpoint to the grim landscape. She had downloaded all of Vault 81's unclassified medical data and was now peppering Naruto with an endless stream of questions about his bioenergetic field. Fascinating, she would chirp, after he explained a rudimentary concept of chakra. Your cellular structure must possess a mitochondrial efficiency that is orders of magnitude beyond the human baseline. Does this, Kurama, entity function as a symbiotic biological battery, or is its energy generation purely metaphysical? It's complicated, Curie. Naruto would reply, a weary but patient smile on his face. Piper was quieter than usual, scribbling furiously in her notepad. She was trying to connect the dots. A synth mayor, an asset in Goodneighbor, a mysterious biological sample, and a secret vault tech experiment. The picture was still murky, but the edges were starting to form, revealing a conspiracy of terrifying scope. The Institute wasn't just replacing people, they were engaged in advanced biological research, using the entire Commonwealth as their laboratory. Kate, however, was their most immediate concern. The reprieve Naruto's chakra had given her was fading, and the jagged edges of withdrawal were beginning to saw at her again. But something had shifted. The raw, screaming desperation was still there. A beast roaring in the back of her mind, but it was now tempered by a fragile, newfound resolve. She had watched Naruto give away her one shot at an easy cure to save a child, and then promised to stand in the storm with her. The memory was an anchor in the hurricane. When the tremors started in her hands, she would clench her fists, her knuckles white, her gaze fixed on the ground, and she would fight it. It was a brutal, silent war waged within her own skin, and for the first time, she was fighting to win. Their path was now dictated by Curie's latest, and most audacious, request. Major Naruto, she had announced as they left the vault, her optical sensors glowing with intellectual fervor. Your ability to heal is remarkable, but limited by your own biological form. My current chassis, while durable, is ill-suited for the complex analysis and delicate manipulation required to truly understand and perhaps even replicate your abilities. There is a solution. My research indicates the existence of a highly advanced, pre-war robotics facility. Within it, there is a prototype, synth, body, a synthetic humanoid form with a cognitive interface that would allow me to transfer my consciousness. A synth body, Piper had interjected, her voice sharp with alarm. Curie, that's Institute technology. It's dangerous. Au contraire, Curie retorted. The technology predates the Institute's current iteration. It is a tool, and like any tool, its morality is defined by its user. With such a form, my ability to assist our group would increase exponentially. I could interface with computer systems, perform complex medical procedures, and even analyze the mysterious sample from the safe with far greater precision. She had then turned to Naruto. However, the facility is located in a region of extreme environmental hazard. The locals refer to it as the Glowing Sea. The name alone was enough to make Piper and Kate flinch. The Glowing Sea was not just a place, it was a legend. A boogeyman story told to scare naughty Wasteland children. It was the epicenter of one of the bombs that had ended the world, a vast, irradiated crater where the very air was poison and the ground glowed with a sickly green light. It was said that nothing sane or natural lived there, only twisted monstrosities and the most fanatical of cultists. To go there was suicide. It is too dangerous, Kate had rasped, her voice rough. No one comes back from the Glowing Sea. Naruto had listened, his expression thoughtful. He looked at Curie, at her earnest, unwavering desire to evolve, to become more, to help. He looked at the test tube containing the green liquid, which he now carried in a lead-lined pouch. He knew they needed to understand what it was, and Curie, in a more advanced form, was their best chance. And then he looked at the horizon, in the direction of this glowing sea. He could feel it, even from here. A vast, overwhelming concentration of the same tainted, wrong, energy he'd felt since he'd awakened. It was a cancer on the world's natural energy field. But it was also a source of immense power. "We'll go," he had said, his decision silencing all argument. "Curie needs this upgrade, and I need to see this place for myself." The journey south was a descent into hell. The landscape grew progressively more twisted and blighted. The scrubby, brown vegetation gave way to petrified, blackened trees that clawed at the sky like skeletal hands. The air grew thick and hazy, and the faint, acrid smell of radiation became a constant, metallic tang at the back of their throats. They chewed on Rad-X tablets. But Naruto could feel the radiation pressing in on them, a constant, insidious pressure. He wrapped his companions in a thin, almost invisible cloak of his own chakra. A barrier that deflected the worst of the radiation, a feat that left him feeling drained, but kept them from collapsing. Soon, the ground itself began to change, shifting from cracked earth to fused black glass and patches of soil that pulsed with a soft, ethereal green light. They had arrived. The glowing sea was a vast, open wound in the earth, a crater miles across, bathed in an eerie, perpetual twilight. The sky above was a permanent, sickly yellow-green storm, with clouds that roiled and lightning that arced between them without a sound. It was a place of profound, unnatural silence. "Gods," Piper whispered, her face pale behind the grimy lens of her gas mask. "It's beautiful and horrifying." Naruto felt the wrongness here more acutely than anywhere else. The natural energy was so corrupted, so twisted. It was barely recognizable. Trying to draw on it, to enter sage mode, would be like trying to drink from a river of poison. Yet, his own chakra, Kurama's chakra, seemed to react to it, pushing back against the oppressive radiation with an instinctive, aggressive vigor. He was a bubble of pure, vibrant life in an ocean of death. It wasn't long before they encountered the region's inhabitants. The first was a deathclaw, a monster of legend that Piper had only ever heard of in terrified whispers. It was a bipedal reptilian horror, taller than 2 men, with massive claws that could shred steel. It rose from behind a ridge of fused rock, its roar shaking the very air. Piper and Kate screamed, fumbling for their weapons. Curie let out a series of alarmed beeps. But Naruto was already moving. "Stay back," he commanded. He didn't have time for a complex plan. This was a test of pure power. He formed a series of hand signs, a sequence he hadn't used since waking in this world. He drew in a deep breath. And for the first time, he forced a large amount of his chakra into his lungs, mixing it with the tainted air. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. He spewed forth a massive orb of roiling, incandescent flame. It wasn't the clean, powerful jutsu of his past. The corrupted air made it unstable, spitting and crackling with volatile energy. But it was more than enough. The fireball engulfed the Deathclaw, which shrieked in agony as its tough hide was seared and blackened. It staggered, wounded but not dead, and charged. Naruto met the charge head-on. He created 2 shadow clones, and together, they became a blur of orange and black. They swarmed the massive beast, not with jutsu, but with a relentless taijutsu assault. Naruto leapt onto the creature's back, ran up its spine, and drove a chakra-enhanced fist into the base of its skull. There was a sickening crack, and the monster crashed to the ground, twitching, then still. His companions stared, speechless. They had just witnessed him take down a mythical beast with his bare hands and what looked like magic. As they pressed on, they found more signs of life. Not creatures, but people. Strange, shackle structures were built around pools of glowing, radioactive waste. Figures in hooded, patched-up suits moved between them, their movements slow and deliberate, like priests in a temple. They had found the children of Adam. A group of them, led by a woman with a fanatical light in her eyes, intercepted them. "Halt," she cried, her voice muffled by her mask. "You walk upon Adam's holy ground, unbelievers. You are not welcome here." Quote, Naruto stepped forward, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. "We're not looking for trouble. We are just passing through." The woman, who introduced herself as Mother Isolde, scoffed. "All are unbelievers until they have been bathed in Adam's glow and are reborn in his divine fission. You are not robed in his light. You resist his gift." She pointed a trembling finger at Naruto. "Especially you. You walk through his cradle unprotected, yet you are not touched. You are an affront, a blasphemy." It was then that another figure emerged from the small, makeshift church behind them. She was younger than the others, her movements less rigid. Her hooded suit was cleaner. Her eyes, visible through her mosque's visor, were a sharp, intelligent gray. She carried a strange, irradiated weapon, but held it in a non-threatening manner. "Mother, perhaps we should not be so hasty," the younger woman said, her voice calm and measured. "They have not shown us hostility. They defeated a deathclaw that has plagued our pilgrims for weeks. Perhaps they are an omen." "An omen of what, Sister Alara?" Mother Isolde snapped. "They are outsiders. They mock Adam with their very presence." Naruto focused on the younger one, Alara. He could sense a difference in her. While the others radiated a blind, fervent fanaticism, her energy was questioning. Her faith was a shield, but there were cracks in it. She was a believer, but she was also a thinker. "We mean no disrespect to your Adam," Naruto said, addressing Alara directly. "We seek a pre-war robotics facility nearby. If you can point us in the right direction, we will be on our way and leave you to your worship." Alara seemed to consider his words. "The facility you seek is dangerous. It is guarded by machines of the old world, and the glow there is strong enough to dissolve a man in minutes. Why would you risk such a journey?" "For her," Naruto said, gesturing to Kyuri. "She seeks a new body, to better herself. To better help us all." Quote, Alara's gaze fell upon Kyuri, then upon the strange, mismatched group. The journalist, the addict, the floating robot, and the man who walked through radiation as if it were a spring rain. Her curiosity warred with her ingrained dogma. Before she could answer, a deep, earth-shattering groan echoed across the crater. The ground trembled, and from a deep, glowing fissure nearby, a creature of nightmare began to emerge. It was a colossal, mutated centipede, its body dozens of yards long, its carapace glowing with an intense, sickly green light. Its head was a horrifying mass of snapping pincers and multiple, glowing eyes. The children of Adam cried out, some in terror, others in ecstatic fervor. "An angel of Adam!" Mother Isolde shrieked, falling to her knees. "He has come to deliver us unto him, to usher us into the great division." Alara stared, her faith and her reason locked in a mortal struggle. It was a monster, a horrifying mutation, but the sheer power of it, the overwhelming radiation pouring from its body, was intoxicating. Was this truly a messenger of her god? Naruto didn't have time for theological debates. "Get back," he yelled to his friends, pushing them behind a rock outcropping. He looked at the colossal beast, at the river of raw, radioactive energy pouring from it. He felt the immense pressure on his own chakra, the whirl. D's tainted energy trying to smother him. And then he had an idea. A terrible, reckless, brilliant idea. He closed his eyes, and he did the one thing he had avoided since he arrived. He didn't just shish back against the tainted natural energy. He opened himself to it. He reached out with his senses, not to reject the radiation, but to gather it. It was like embracing poison, a violation of everything he had learned as a sage. His body screamed in protest. Kurama roared in the back of his mind, a silent, furious warning. But Naruto held firm. He filtered the corrupted energy through his own massive chakra reserves. using his own life force as a crucible to purify the poison. It was agonizing, like swallowing fire. His skin began to glow, not with the sickly green of the wasteland, but with a brilliant, golden light. Red, vertical pupils appeared in his eyes, and black pigmentation formed around them. He had entered sage mode. But it was not the perfect, serene sage mode of his world. This was a desperate, dangerous, wasteland sage mode, powered by the very corruption he was fighting. The power that flooded his system was immense, terrifying, and utterly unstable. The children of Adam stared, their fanaticism replaced by stunned silence. Mother Isolde's jaw hung open. Alara watched, her heart pounding, her entire belief system crumbling. The man before her was not just resisting Adam's glow. He was commanding it. He was absorbing the very essence of their god and turning it into his own power. He shone with a light far brighter, far purer than any radiation she had ever witnessed. Naruto opened his eyes, now glowing with golden energy. He looked at the giant centipede, and he held out his hand. He didn't need a fireball this time. He gathered the supercharged natural energy, mixing it with his own chakra, and formed a swirling, golden orb in his palm. It was a Rasengan, but it was unlike any he had ever created. It hummed with a terrifying power, arcs of golden lightning crackling around it. He vanished. He moved so fast he left an afterimage, a blur of gold against the green gloom. He appeared directly above the colossal beast's head, and he plunged the golden Rasengan downwards. There was no sound, just a blinding flash of golden light that consumed the entire area, momentarily turning the glowing sea's twilight into brilliant day. The light was not burning, not destructive. It was cleansing. For a split second, the oppressive, sickly energy of the crater was pushed back, replaced by a feeling of warmth, life, and overwhelming power. When the light faded, the giant centipede was gone. Not blown to pieces, but simply dissolved, vanished. And where it had been, the ground no longer glowed with its sickly green light. The grass that sprouted there was, for the first time in 200 years, a vibrant, healthy green. Naruto landed softly, the golden aura fading from him. The backlash from using the tainted energy hit him like a physical blow, and he staggered. Leaning on a rock for support, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The effort had cost him dearly. There was a profound silence. Piper, Kate, and Curie looked on, their faces a mixture of awe, terror, and profound reverence. The children of Adam were on their knees, but they were no longer looking at the sky. They were looking at Naruto. Mother Isolde was trembling, unable to form words. Sister Alara, however, slowly walked towards him. She removed her mask, revealing a young, intelligent face, pale with shock, her gray eyes wide with a terrifying, world-shattering revelation. He god she had worshipped her whole life, the divine, radioactive glow, was a force that this man could tame, purify, and wield as his own. He had not just performed a miracle. He had redefined the very nature of divinity in her world. She stopped a few feet from him, her gaze fixed on his face. What are you?" she whispered, her voice filled not with fear, but with a desperate need to understand. Naruto looked up, meeting her gaze. He gave her a weary, exhausted smile. "I'm just a man," he said, his voice raspy. "A man who believes that even in a world poisoned by the past, you can still find a way to make things grow again." Quote, Alara looked from his tired but kind face to the impossible patch of green grass blooming in the heart of the glowing sea. Her faith in Adam, the god of division and decay, was shattered. And in its place, a new, far more powerful and dangerous faith was beginning to take root. A faith in the sage of the wasteland. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Pride One. The I lens that followed the dissipation of the golden Rasengan was more profound than the irradiated stillness that had preceded it. It was a vacuum, hollowed out by an event so far beyond the comprehends. Ion of its witnesses that their minds refused to process it. The impossible patch of vibrant green grass, steaming softly in the toxic air, was an altar upon which the laws of their universe had just been sacrificed. The children of Adam were prostrate, their fanatical faith shattered and reforged in a single, blinding instant. They were no longer worshipping the abstract, cruel god of radioactive decay. Their new deity was flesh and blood, stood leaning against a rock, and wore a tattered orange coat. Mother Isolde trembled on the ground, her face buried in her hands, muttering prayers that had no name. Sister Alara stood alone, her mask discarded, her world tilted on its axis. The man before her, Naruto, was breathing heavily, the golden light gone from his eyes, leaving only a deep, bone-crushing weariness. He looked human, vulnerable, and that, somehow, was more terrifying than the power he had just unleashed. A god who bled was a concept her catechism had never prepared her for. What are you?" she whispered again, the words feeling utterly inadequate. Naruto looked up, his gaze meeting hers. A faint, tired smile touched his lips. "I'm just a man," he said, his voice raspy with exhaustion. "A man who believes that even in a world poisoned by the past, you can still find a way to make things grow again." He pushed himself off the rock, taking an unsteady step. Piper and Kate rushed to his side, their own shock momentarily forgotten in the face of his obvious fatigue. "Naruto, are you okay?" Piper asked, her voice tight with concern. "Just tired," he breathed. "Using the energy here, it takes a toll." He had purified the poison, but the act had left him feeling as though he'd been wrestling with the world's very soul, and had only barely won. Kate, for her part, was silent. She looked from Naruto's pale face to the vanquished spot where a monster of nightmares had been, then to the stunned cultists. She had seen him fight in the cage, a display of impossible skill. This was something else entirely. This was not fighting. This was rewriting reality. The simmering anger and resentment she often felt towards the world, and towards him for making her confront her own demons, was being replaced by a terrifying, humbling awe. Hyuri hovered closer, her optical sensors whirring loudly. "Major Naruto, your energy signature spiked to a level one previously theorized to be impossible. You have converted ambient gamma radiation into a coherent, purified bioenergetic state. The scientific ramifications are staggering. I must take readings later." "Hyuri," Naruto managed, holding up a hand. "First, the robotics facility." It was Alara who responded. She seemed to shake herself from her stupor, a new, fervent clarity in her gray eyes. She knelt, not in worship, but in a gesture of profound respect, retrieving her discarded mask. "I will guide you," she said, her voice clear and strong, devoid of the questioning hesitation it had held before. "I know this place. I know the path that is safest from the glow and the beasts. It is the least I can do, for the one who showed me the true face of Adam." She looked at the patch of green grass. The creative fire, not the slow decay. Before anyone could object, she had already turned and begun walking, her pace confident. The other children of Adam remained frozen, and Mother Isolde made no move to stop her. Alara had a new prophet to follow. The group exchanged a look, a silent consensus passing between them, and followed her. With Alara as their guide, their passage through the rest of the GL Owing Sea was swift and strangely peaceful. She led them along hidden ravines and through caves that shielded them from the worst of the radiation, her knowledge of the treacherous landscape invaluable. She spoke little, but her attention was constantly on Naruto, a mixture of reverence and intense curiosity. After another hour of walking, they reached the edge of the vast crater. The sickly green glow receded behind them, and the ground slowly returned to the familiar cracked brown of the Commonwealth. In the distance, they could see the skeletal remains of a large, pre-war factory complex. "There," Alara said, pointing. "The robotics facility, as you wished." It was at that exact moment that the world changed again. It began with a sound. A low, deep hum that was felt more than heard, a vibration that resonated in their bones and teeth. It was a sound of immense, contained power, utterly alien to the wasteland's usual chorus of wind and groaning ruins. Everyone froze, scanning the sky. "What is that?" Piper asked, her hand instinctively going to the pipe pistol at her hip. A shadow fell over them, vast and swift. It was as if a mountain had taken flight, blotting out the dying afternoon sun and plunging the world into a sudden, premature dusk. They all looked up, their mouths agape. Descending from the roiling, yellow clouds was an airship. But that word was a pale, pathetic descriptor for the behemoth that hung in the sky above them. It was a leviathan of steel and rivets, a floating fortress bristling with cannon batteries, missile pods, and massive, rotating turbines. It was a relic of old-world military might, impossibly restored and weaponized, a declaration of power and order in a world defined by chaos and decay. On its flank, painted in stark white, was the symbol of a sword flanked by gears. "The Pride One," Piper breathed, her voice a mixture of awe and dread. "The Brotherhood of Steel. I'd heard rumors they were coming back, but I never imagined." As the colossal airship settled into a high orbit, its shadow sweeping across the land, smaller aircraft detached from its belly. They were vertibirds, armored aerial transports that moved with a brutal, roaring efficiency. A squadron of them broke off and headed directly for their position. "They've seen us," Kate spat, drawing her shotgun. "They're not here to say hello." "Hold your fire," Naruto commanded, his voice regaining its strength. He watched the approaching vertibirds, his mind racing. This was not a random patrol. This was a targeted, deliberate show of force. They had emerged from the glowing sea, a place no one sane entered, at the exact moment this flying fortress arrived. To the occupants of that airship, they were not travelers, they were an anomaly, and anomalies were threats. 3 vertibirds landed in a triangular formation around them, their turbines kicking up a blinding storm of dust. Ramps slammed down, and soldiers clad in bulky, intimidating suits of power armor stomped out. Each soldier was a walking tank, armed with laser rifles and miniguns, their movements disciplined and menacing. They formed a perimeter, their weapons aimed squarely at Naruto's small, mismatched group. A single figure strode forward from the central vertibird. This one's power armor was different, sleeker, more decorated, with the insignia of a knight captain painted on its pauldron. He helmet retracted with a hiss of pneumatics, revealing the face of a woman. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, with severe, dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Her expression was one of absolute, unwavering professionalism. She was not a raider or a scavenger. She was a soldier. Unidentified ground team, her voice rang out, amplified by her suit's external speakers. It was calm, authoritative, and left no room for negotiation. "You were in a restricted sector under the authority of the Brotherhood of Steel. By order of Elder Maxon, you will cease all movement. Lay down your arms, and identify yourselves." Piper opened her mouth to speak, but the knight captain's gaze was already fixed on Naruto. Her eyes narrowed slightly, taking in his strange attire, his lack of protective gear, and the aura of calm confidence that seemed utterly at odds with the half-dozen heavy weapons aimed at his chest. "You," the knight captain stated. "You are clearly the leader of this assortment. Who are you?" Naruto met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. We are travelers, and we mean you no harm. Travelers do not emerge from the glowing sea," she countered, her voice cold as steel. "Mutants, cultists, and abominations emerge from the glowing sea." Her gaze flickered to Curie, then to Alara's children of Adam's suit. "It appears you have all 3. My orders are to contain unregistered hostiles and secure any unauthorized technology." "Containing us would be unwise," Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "Your men are well armed, but they would be facing something they are not trained for. I would prefer to talk. A conversation between leaders is always more reductive than a battle between soldiers." A flicker of something, surprise, annoyance, crossed the knight captain's face. This was not the response she was used to. She was used to fear, panicked compliance, or foolish, suicidal defiance. This was something else. This was a man standing in the shadow of a flying battleship, surrounded by walking tanks, and negotiating as an equal. "My name is Knight Captain Serafina," she said. Her tone clipped. "And my orders do not include conversations with potential hostiles. They involve neutralization and acquisition." "Then your orders are inefficient," Naruto replied bluntly. "You don't know who I am, what I can do, or what I want. Acting without that information is a tactical error. Your elder would not approve of such wastefulness, would he?" Serafina was silent for a long moment, the whirring of her power armor the only sound. He was right. Her orders were to assess and contain, and this situation was far outside standard parameters. The energy readings from the glowing sea had been off the charts moments before they arrived, followed by a massive, localized, cleansing effect that their scribes were still trying to analyze. This man was at the epicenter of it. He was not just a hostile, he was a primary intelligence asset. Your audacity is noted, traveler, she finally said. Very well. Elder Maxon will want to debrief you himself. You and your companions will be escorted to the Pride. This is not a request. Naruto nodded. A direct confrontation here was a losing proposition, not for him, but for his companions. He could likely escape, but they would be captured or killed. Surrendering the initiative now to gain information and a superior strategic position later was the only logical move. We accept your invitation, Knight Captain. The flight to the Pride was tense. They were separated, each loaded onto a different vertebrate, flanked by impassive soldiers in power armor. As Naruto's transport ascended, he got his first true look at the airship. It was a city in the sky, a self-contained world of military precision. He could see knights training on the flight deck, scribes rushing between workstations, and mechanics swarming over parked vertebrates. It was a testament to the power of unity and technology, a power this brotherhood wielded with absolute conviction. They landed on the main deck with a heavy thud. The air smelled of ozone, gun oil, and recycled air. The discipline was palpable. Knights saluted knight captains, orders were barked in crisp, formal language, and every single person moved with purpose. It was the reincarnation of the military doctrine of his own world's past, a stark contrast to the ramshackle survivalism of the Commonwealth. Naruto and his companions were reunited on the deck, surrounded by guards. Piper looked around, her reporter's mind cataloging every detail, a look of horrified fascination on her face. Kate was tense, her hand never far from the knife she still had hidden. Her expression a mask of defiant hostility. Curie was scanning everything, her internal sensors likely overloading with the sheer volume of new data. Alara was silent and observant, her gray eyes taking in this new, rigid power structure, a mirror opposite to the chaotic faith she had just abandoned. Knight Captain Serafina led them from the flight deck into the heart of the Pride. The interior was a labyrinth of polished steel corridors, humming machinery, and stark, functional quarters. They passed an armory filled with laser rifles and suits of power armor, a mess hall where soldiers ate in disciplined silence, and a research bay where scribes in lab coats hunched over glowing terminals. It was a world dedicated to a single, unified purpose. Finally, they reached the command deck. It was a vast, open space at the prow of the ship, with a panoramic view of the wasteland stretching out below. Standing before the main viewport, his back to them, was a man in a unique, ornate suit of power armor. A heavy battle coat slung over it. He turned, and Naruto felt the immense weight of his authority. This was Elder Arthur Maxon. He was young, his face grim and etched with a severity far beyond his years. He was the last descendant of the Brotherhood's founder, a zealot with the blood of a messiah, and his eyes burned with the cold fire of absolute certainty. Knight Captain Serafina, your report. Maxon commanded, his voice a low, powerful baritone that filled the entire deck. Elder Maxon, Serafina said, snapping to a crisp salute. We secured the anomaly at the edge of the glowing sea. The subject, she nodded towards Naruto, claims to be a traveler. His companions consist of a journalist from Diamond City, a chem-addicted brawler, a non-standard robotic unit, and a member of the Children of Atom cult. Subject is unregistered, displays abilities outside of known parameters, and was present at the epicenter of the energy event. Maxon's cold, penetrating gaze fell upon Naruto. He walked slowly towards him, circling him like a predator examining a strange new prey. I have read the preliminary reports, Maxon said. Energy signatures that defy physics. Cleansing of radiation. You walk out of the most irradiated pit on this continent without a scratch. Explain yourself. What kind of mutant are you? I am not a mutant, Naruto said calmly, refusing to be intimidated by the display. I am human. My abilities are my own. They come from what I call chakra. Chakra, Maxon scoffed, the word dripping with disdain. A delusion. A.W. Astellan superstition to explain away your own mutation. You are a product of the radiation that has corrupted this land, a perversion of the human form. Your power, whatever its source, is a threat to the purity of humanity and must be controlled. Power is a tool, Elder, Naruto countered, his voice steady. You use your power to build this airship, to command your soldiers, to hoard technology. I use my power to protect my friends and make grass grow in a poisoned crater. Tell me, which of those is the real threat to humanity? A shocked silence fell over the command deck. Scribes and knights stared, aghast at the stranger's sheer audacity. No one spoke to Elder Maxon that way. Serafina stood rigid, her face a mask of professionalism, but inside, she felt a jolt of something akin to admiration. It was one thing to be brave in a fight, it was another to stand before the absolute authority of the Brotherhood of Steel and challenge his ideology to his face. Maxon's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint in them. You are arrogant, and your arrogance will be your undoing. The Brotherhood exists to preserve humanity, to protect it from the horrors of technology run rampant, the synths, the super mutants, and abominations like you. We are the only hope for this wasteland. Hope isn't found by hiding in a steel fortress and pointing guns at anything you don't understand, Naruto shot back. Hope is found by reaching out, by helping people, by giving them the freedom to build their own future, not by forcing them to accept yours. Enough, Maxon roared, his voice echoing off the steel walls. He raised a hand, and every soldier on the deck raised their laser rifle, aiming them at Naruto and his companions. You are a threat, a variable that cannot be allowed to roam free. You will be contained, studied, and if necessary, eliminated. Knight Captain, take them to the brig. Prepare the subject for extensive analysis. Serafina hesitated for a fraction of a second. Her orders were absolute, but the man's words, they had struck a chord. Was the Brotherhood's way truly the only way? She pushed the thought down. It was treason. Yes, Elder, she said, her voice betraying none of her internal conflict. But as she moved to apprehend him, Naruto held up a hand. That would be another tactical error, Elder Maxon, he said, his tone shifting from confrontational to something more akin to negotiation. You have a problem, a big one. The Institute. Maxon froze. What do you know of the Institute? I know they have agents in Diamond City's government. I know they are conducting biological research in secret vaults. I know they are your true enemy, a cancer spreading through the Commonwealth while you fly above it all, polishing your armor, Naruto said, his voice sharp and incisive. You see me as a threat, but I see you as a potential, if misguided, ally. I can help you fight them. I can go where your men in power armor cannot. I can find their secrets. Maxon stared at him, his mind clearly working, weighing the stranger's words. The offer was tantalizing. Their intelligence on the Institute was limited, their operations against them blunt and costly. This anomaly offered a new, potentially devastating weapon. You propose an alliance? Maxon asked, his voice thick with suspicion. I propose a trial, Naruto corrected. Give me a mission, a task your soldiers have failed at, or one ill-suited to your methods. Let me prove my worth to you. Let me show you that I am more valuable as a scalpel than as a specimen on a dissection table. A long silence stretched. Serafina held her breath. This was an unprecedented moment. Finally, Maxon gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. There is a situation. A high-priority reconnaissance mission into Fort Strong. The location has been overrun by super mutants of a particularly resilient strain. We have lost 2 teams trying to clear it. We need to know what they are guarding, but our forces have been unable to breach their inner defenses. He looked at Serafina. Knight Captain, you will lead this mission. The asset, he gestured to Naruto, will be your primary infiltration unit. You will observe him. You will document his abilities. And you will assess his threat level and his potential utility. His companions will remain here, under guard, as collateral. Succeed, and we will discuss this alliance further. Fail, and your friends will pay the price for your incompetence. Naruto met the elder's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. It was a test, a leash, and a death sentence all rolled into one. But it was also an opportunity. I accept your terms, Naruto said. Later, in the briefing room, Serafina laid out a schematic of Fort Strong on a light table. Her demeanor was all business. Her voice clipped and professional. The fort is an old pre-war coastal installation, she explained, pointing to key locations. The super mutants have fortified the main armory. We believe they are protecting something inside, possibly a stockpile of mini nukes. Your objective is to infiltrate the armory, identify the asset they are protecting, and report back. You will Be provided with a standard recon suit and a laser rifle. I won't need them, Naruto said, examining the map. I have my own equipment. Serafina looked up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. You will adhere to Brotherhood protocol. This is my mission, and you will follow my orders. Naruto smiled faintly, a disarming gesture that seemed to throw her off her rhythm. And if your orders get me killed, does that count as a success or a failure for your report? He tapped the map. Your teams failed because they used a frontal assault. Power armor is loud. It's predictable. The super mutants knew you were coming from a mile away. I will not make the same mistake. He looked at her, his blue eyes sharp and intelligent. Your job is to observe and document, Knight Captain. My job is to succeed where your soldiers failed. So I suggest you stay back, watch closely, and try to keep up. He turned and walked towards the door, leaving her standing at the table. Serafina stared at his back, a complex mixture of professional indignation, grudging respect, and an unsettling, unfamiliar curiosity swirling within her. This man was arrogant, insubordinate, and possibly insane. He was also the most competent and compelling individual she had ever met. Her mission was to observe him, but she had a sinking feeling that he would be the one observing her, testing her, and forcing her to question everything she believed in. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. A Delicate Alliance. The belly of the vertebrate was a cage of trembling steel and roaring wind. Naruto sat impassively on the cold metal bench, the rhythmic vibrations a familiar sensation from his own world's more primitive airships. Across from him, Knight Captain Serafina stood rigid in her power armor, her helmet locked in place, a faceless effigy of military dogma. Her silence was a weapon, intended to intimidate, to remind him of his status as a prisoner, an asset, being moved on a chessboard. It was a wasted effort. Naruto's mind was not on the soldier before him, but on the 3 women he had left behind in the belly of the beast. His last 24 hours aboard the Pride had been a masterclass in diplomacy under duress. He had been given a small, sterile room, a comfortable cell, and his companions were quartered together in a similar, heavily guarded chamber. Elder Maxon's strategy was clear: isolate the anomaly, hold his friends as leverage. But Maxon had underestimated the bonds that had already been forged in the Wasteland's crucible. Before being separated, Naruto had met with his companions, their makeshift T-Council convening in the shadow of their captors. The scene replayed in his mind, a vivid tableau against the vertebrate's droning hum. Piper had been vibrating with a caged reporter's energy, her EY's alight with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. This is it, Naruto. This is the story. A secret, flying military dictatorship just parks itself over the Commonwealth. The people have a right to know. Their technology, their ideology, it's fascist. We have to expose them. If you can get me any internal data, comm logs, supply manifests, I can build a case that will turn the entire region against them. Her loyalty was to the truth, to the people, and the Brotherhood was the biggest, most dangerous secret she had ever encountered. Kate, pacing the room like a cornered wolf, had scoffed. Her sobriety, still new and raw, made the confinement feel like a personal hell. To hell with stories, Piper. Look at this arsenal. These bastards are sitting on enough firepower to wipe out every raider camp from here to the glowing sea. And they're not doing it. They're too busy polishing their own armor. There's a raider warlord, name of Zeller, who's been preying on caravans near Quincy. He's got a fortress full of chems and slaves. The Brotherhood could wipe him out in an afternoon, but they can't be bothered. If you're making a deal with these tin cans, make 'em do something useful. Point them at the real scum. Her desire was for tangible justice, for a cathartic, violent cleansing of the filth that had defined her world. Curie, ever the scientist, had a different perspective. She was enthralled. Magnifique. The technological density of this vessel is astounding. Their fusion core efficiency, their materials science, their networked computer systems. Major Naruto, my primary objective remains the acquisition of a suitable synth body. However, the data stored within the Prideone's main computer could advance my research by decades. Specifically, their research on the energy signatures of mutant lifeforms could provide a crucial cross-reference for my analysis of your own chakra. If you could acquire a data sample, a copy of their research archives, her quest was for knowledge. for the tools to understand the new world she found herself in. And Alara, the quietest of the four, had watched the exchange with her wide, perceptive gray eyes. She had finally spoken, her voice soft but firm, cutting through the others' passionate demands. They speak of purity, of preserving humanity. It is the same language as Mother Isolde, but with steel instead of faith. They believe their path is the only righteous one, and they will eradicate all others. It is a hollow faith, a faith in machines and dogma. Be careful, Naruto. A man who believes he is a god is dangerous. A man who believes his god has ordered him to kill is 1,000 times more so. Do not let them corrupt your purpose. Do not become a weapon for their crusade. Her concern was for his soul, for the integrity of the new faith she had placed in him, a faith in life and creation, not destruction and zealotry. 4 women, 4 wildly different yet valid desires. Expose the truth, enact justice, acquire knowledge, preserve integrity. It was a microcosm of the entire Wasteland's conflicting needs. And they were all looking to him to fulfill them. Maxon saw him as a weapon to be aimed. His Fryan DS saw him as a key to unlock their own ambitions. He had smiled, a genuine, confident smile that had settled their anxieties. I will not forget, he had promised them. I will not become their weapon. But I will use their strength to get us what we need. All of it. Now, hurtling towards Fort Strong, that promise echoed in his mind. This mission was not just Maxon's test. It was his own. A test of whether he could navigate the treacherous currents of this new world's politics and warfare, and deliver on the hopes of the people who had put their trust in him. Approaching the target zone, Arafina's voice crackled over the vertebrate's internal comms, pulling him from his thoughts. We will set down a half-mile out. Standard insertion procedure. You will follow my lead. Negative, Knight Captain, Naruto replied, his voice calm and clear. You will set down. I will disembark before you land. That is a violation of protocol. The altitude is over 300 feet. Then your protocols are too restrictive. Naruto said simply. He stood and walked to the vertebrate's open side door. The wind whipped at his coat, the ground a rushing blur of green and brown below. Your job is to observe. You'll get a much better view if I'm not waiting for you to catch up. Before Serafina could protest further, he simply stepped out of the door. For a heart-stopping second, Serafina thought he had committed suicide. She lunged towards the door, peering down, expecting to see a broken form on the ground. Instead, she witnessed an impossibility. Naruto was not falling. He was running down the sheer, invisible wall of the air, his feet glowing with a faint blue chakra that allowed him to adhere to the rushing wind itself. He landed on the branch of a tall pine tree, the branch barely bowing under his weight. And then vanished into the foliage like a ghost. The vertebrate pilot's stunned voice crackled over the comm. Knight Captain, did you see that? Serafina stared to the empty forest where he had disappeared, her mind, so accustomed to the rigid logic of physics and military science, struggling to find a file for what she had just seen. Just get us on the ground, she ordered, her voice a fraction less steady than before. And keep your sights on the fort. Our asset is proceeding with infiltration. Asset. The word already felt insufficient. Meanwhile, in the sterile, guarded quarters aboard the Pridewan, the delicate alliance was having its first true test. The initial shock of their new gilded cage had worn off, replaced by a tense, simmering boredom. Kate was doing push-ups. The rhythmic thud of her hands on the metal floor the only sound for long stretches. The exercise was a lifeline, a way to channel the gnawing energy of her withdrawal into something productive. If I have to sit in this bloody box for one more day, I'm gonna start punching holes in the walls, she grunted, sweat beading on her forehead. Piper was at the room's single viewport, staring down at the sprawling wasteland below. Punching walls won't help, Kate. We need to be smart. We're inside their fortress. This is an intelligence goldmine. She turned, her eyes bright. The guards change shifts every 4 hours. They have a patrol route. Their comms use a low-frequency encryption. I've been listening. It's mostly just status reports, but it's a pattern. And patterns can be broken. Curie, who had been sitting perfectly still on a bench, her optical sensors glowing softly, suddenly chirped. Fascinating. Your observational capacity is highly developed, Piper. You are processing social and logistical data in much the same way I would process scientific variables. She then turned her head towards Kate. And your method of converting psychological distress into rigorous physical exertion is an effective, if temporary, method of symptom management. You are all adapting to the stimulus of imprisonment in unique and efficient ways. Alara, who had been meditating in a corner, opened her eyes. You see this place as a puzzle, Piper. You see it as a cage, Kate. You see it as a laboratory, Curie. But it is a temple. And every word spoken, every soldier that marches past, is part of their liturgy. They worship order. They worship strength. To understand them, we must understand their faith. Kate stopped her push-ups and sat up, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. Faith. They're soldiers, not priests. Are they? Alara countered, her gaze distant. They have a sacred text, their codex. They have a prophet, their founder, Roger Maxon. They have a Messiah, the Elder. They seek to purify the world of unbelievers, whom they call mutants and synths. How is that different from the children of Adam, except that their God is technology? A tense silence fell. Piper looked at Alara, her reporter's mind intrigued by the new angle. Curie tilted her head, processing the anthropological data. Kate just looked confused. So what's your point? Kate asked. My point, Alara said, standing up and walking to the viewport beside Piper, is that to fight an enemy, you must understand what they love. They love their technology. They see it as sacred. So the greatest heresy, the greatest threat to them, would not be to destroy it, but to show them a power that is greater, a power that comes not from machines, but from life. A power like Naruto's. Piper's eyes widened. So when they see what he can really do, they will either fall down in worship, Alara finished grimly, or they will try to crucify him. Naruto moved through the salt-blasted forest surrounding Fort Strong like water flowing downhill. He was a whisper, his feet making no sound on the dead leaves, his presence suppressed by a cloak of chakra that bent light and sound around him. The half-mile to the fort passed in minutes. The coastal installation was a ruin of crumbling concrete bunkers and rusted artillery guns, all pointing silently out at the gray, churning sea. The super mutants had turned it into a slaughterhouse. Crude barricades of scrap metal and body parts blocked the main entrances. Hounds, grotesquely mutated dogs, patrolled the perimeter. From a high vantage point, he watched. He could see the main mutant encampment in the fort's central courtyard. A hulking brute with yellowish skin, a master, was bellowing orders to the smaller, green-skinned brutes. They were disorganized, relying on brute strength and numbers. A frontal assault, even with power armor, was foolish. They would swarm and overwhelm. He created a single shadow clone and sent it on a wide flanking maneuver to the far side of the fort. While the clone created a minor disturbance, a thrown rock, a whispered insult that only a mutant's keen ears could hear, drawing the attention of the outer patrols. Naruto slipped past the main gate, a shadow in the midday sun. Inside, the fort was a damp, rotting labyrinth. The air was thick with the stench of salt, decay, and cooked meat. He moved through the corridors, his senses on high alert. He could hear the heavy, plodding footsteps of mutant patrols, feel the vibrations through the concrete floor. He was a shinobi in his element. This was no different from infiltrating an enemy fortress in the Land of Fire. The enemy was just bigger, uglier, and significantly dumber. He found what he was looking for in the lower levels, the main armory. The steel door was thick enough to withstand a tank shell, and it was barricaded from the inside. But next to it was a ventilation shaft, its grating rusted but intact. He channeled a sliver of chakra to his fingertips, dissolving the rusted bolts, and slipped inside. The shaft opened into the armory's observation room. Below him, through a thick, bulletproof window, was the prize. The room was not filled with mini nukes. It was a laboratory, a pre-war biological research lab, remarkably intact. In the center of the room, floating in a massive containment tube filled with a green, viscous fluid, was a sight that made Naruto's stomach clench. It was a person, or what was left of one, suspended in the fluid, hooked up to dozens of tubes. And strapped to the outside of the tube was a small, pre-war duffel bag containing several vials of a swirling green liquid. FEV, the forced evolutionary virus, the very substance that created the super mutants. This wasn't an arms depot. It was their birthplace, and they were guarding their god. His thoughts were interrupted by Serafina's voice, crackling softly in the small comm unit she had insisted he take. "Asset, what is your status? We are in position outside the fort. I am reading no hostile engagement." Naruto keyed the comm. "Infiltration complete, Knight Captain. I am at the objective. And your intelligence was wrong. It is not a cache of mini nukes. It's an FEV research laboratory." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Fev, confirmed. Confirmed," Naruto said. "The mutants are guarding the source of their own creation. Your new orders should be to sterilize this entire facility from orbit." "Negative, Asset," Serafina's voice came back, laced with a new, avaricious excitement. "Fev Res. Urch is a Class Alpha technological artifact. Your orders are updated. Secure that research. Secure a sample of the virus. Eliminate all hostiles. This is a Priority 1 acquisition mission." Naruto looked down at the horrifying scene in the lab. The Brotherhood didn't want to destroy it. They wanted to possess it. To study it. To hoard it. Alara's warning echoed in his mind. "They will try to corrupt your purpose. My purpose is to not let abominations like this exist," Naruto said, his voice turning cold. "I am destroying the lab. You will do no such thing." Serafina's voice was a furious hiss. "I am ordering you to stand down. That is a direct violation of." He crushed the comm unit in his fist. He would not be a party to this. He would not hand this poison over to another group of zealots. He dropped from the observation room into the lab below, landing silently. As he approached the containment tube, a roar from the doorway signaled the arrival of the guards. 2 super mutant brutes filled the entrance, their eyes wide with fury at his desecration of their holy place. The fight was over before it began. Naruto moved with a speed they couldn't track. He disabled the first WITH a precise chakra jab to the nerve cluster behind its knee, causing it to collapse. The second swung a massive sledgehammer, which Naruto sidestepped with contemptuous ease. He ran up the handle of the hammer, leapt onto the mutant's shoulder, and delivered a powerful, 2-fingered strike to its temple. The brute dropped like a stone. He turned back to the lab. He knew he had only minutes before the entire fort descended on him. He placed his hands on the main Fev container and prepared to overload it with chakra, to detonate it and everything in the room. But then he paused. He looked at the duffel bag, at the vials. He thought of Curie. He thought of her quest for knowledge, her desire to understand the Commonwealth's biology. The FEV was a poison, a curse. But knowledge of it, that could be a vaccine, a cure. He made a decision. He grabbed the duffel bag. Then he began planting a series of paper tags around the room, each one covered in a complex spiral of ink. Exploding tags. A simple but effective tool. As he finished, the armory door groaned, then buckled, blasted from its hinges by a rocket. The super mutant master, the yellow-skinned giant from the courtyard, stormed in, flanked by a half-dozen of his brutes. "Puny human, you defile this sacred place. We will tear you apart." Naruto smirked. "You're welcome to try." He formed a hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The RO was instantly filled with a dozen identical Narutos, an overwhelming tide of orange and black that swarmed the stunned super mutants. The battle was pure chaos. The clones, though fragile, were impossibly fast and agile, distracting the brutes, leading them on a merry chase around the lab. In the confusion, the real Naruto slipped out. But he didn't retreat. He headed straight for the fort's main gate. He burst out into the courtyard, the stolen Fev research clutched in his hand, and he saw Serafina and her squad of 2 knights, pinned down behind a ruined barricade by a hail of gunfire from the fort's battlements. "Knight Captain," he yelled, "I could use a little help." Serafina's head snapped up. She saw him, and the bag in his hand. Her professional fury was warring with her survival instinct. "You disobeyed a direct order," she screamed over the gunfire. "And you led your men into a kill box." He yelled back. "Debate it later. Now, fight." He didn't wait for her. He ran direct towards the main source of the gunfire, a fortified pillbox. He was a blur, dodging bullets with an ease that defied physics. He leapt onto the roof of the pillbox, and with a chakra-infused stomp, he caved it in. Silencing the gunners inside, Serafina watched, her jaw slack. He was a one-man army. Inspired, She rallied her men. Advance. Provide covering fire. Target the heavies. What followed was a symphony of violence. Serafina and her knights were the sledgehammer, their laser rifles cutting precise, burning lines through the mutant ranks, their power armor absorbing heavy damage. Naruto was the whirlwind. He flowed through the battlefield like a force of nature, his clones creating chaos, his taijutsu disabling enemies with brutal efficiency. He and Serafina found themselves fighting back to back, a spontaneous, deadly partnership. He would disable a brute, and she would finish it with a precise laser blast. She would suppress a heavy gunner, and he would flank and eliminate it. It was a dance of destruction. And it was devastatingly effective. Finally, only the super mutant master was left, roaring in fury. It charged Serafina, its massive fists raised. Her laser rifle was depleted. She braced for impact. But Naruto was there. He appeared in front of the master, and caught both of its massive fists in his bare hands. The ground cracked beneath his feet from the force, but he did not budge. With a yell, he spun, using the mutant's own momentum to hurl it through the air. It crashed into the wall of the fort with bone-shattering force. As the dust settled, Naruto walked over to the groaning mutant master. He looked back at Serafina, who was staring at him, her chest heaving. The mission was to secure the asset, he said, breathing a little heavily. I have secured it. He held up the duffel bag. It was then that the first of his exploding tags went off. A deep, rumbling explosion from the heart of the fort. Then another, and another. A chain reaction that shook the entire installation to its foundations. Black smoke poured from the armory entrance. You destroyed the lab, Serafina cried, a mixture of fury and awe in her voice. I sterilized the poison, Naruto corrected. But, he tossed her the duffel bag, I saved you a sample. For your research. He had kept one vial for Curie and given the rest to the Brotherhood. He had destroyed the factory, but provided the blueprint. A compromise. A delicate alliance. He had fulfilled his promise. He had enacted justice on the super mutants for Kate. He had acquired knowledge for Curie. He had leverage and intelligence for Piper. And he had done it without becoming a mindless weapon, preserving the integrity Alara had worried about. Serafina looked from the bag in her hands to the man standing before her. Covered in dust but radiating an unshakable confidence. He had disobeyed her, undermined her authority, and single-handedly completed a mission that had killed two of her best teams. And in doing so, he had proven himself to be the most capable asset, the most capable man she had ever seen. Her rigid, black and white world of Brotherhood dogma was suddenly filled with an uncomfortable, exciting shade of gray. Mission accomplished, she finally said into her calm, her voice strained. The asset has been secured. And the threat has been neutralized. We are returning to the Pride. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Institute's Shadow. The return flight to the Pride was a study in pressurized silence. Naruto sat with his eyes closed, not resting, but processing. He was cataloging the feel of the battle. The precise expenditure of chakra, the way Serafina's combat style, rigid, precise, and powerful, had meshed with his own fluid, unpredictable movements. A partnership born of necessity. But a partnership nonetheless. He could feel the Knight Captain's gaze on him from across the vertebrate, a palpable thing, no longer just the look of a soldier assessing a tool, but of a woman trying to solve an impossible equation. He did not need to open his eyes to know that the gears of her conviction were beginning to grind. Their arrival on the flight deck was met with an organized, anxious precision. A team of scribes and soldiers immediately took possession of the duffel bag containing the FEV samples, treating it with the reverence and caution of a holy relic. Serafina ordered her men to stand down and then, with a hiss of pneumatics, her helmet retracted. Her face was smudged with grime, her hair had a few loose strands from its severe bun, and her eyes held a calm, plex storm of emotions. Fury at his insubordination, grudging respect for his effectiveness, and a deep, unsettling curiosity. You were reckless, arrogant, and you directly disobeyed a command from a superior officer, she said. Her voice low and tight, meant for his ears only as they walked towards the command deck. By all rights, I should have you shot. But then you'd have to explain to Elder Maxon why your mission succeeded where two of his best teams were annihilated, Naruto replied calmly, not even looking at her. And you'd have to admit that my methods, while unorthodox, were superior to yours. Your pride as a soldier wouldn't allow that, would it, Knight Captain? She stopped walking, and he turned to face her. This isn't a game, Uzumaki, she said, her voice a dangerous whisper. This is the preservation of humanity. I agree, he said, and his expression was suddenly serious, all trace of arrogance gone. But humanity isn't preserved by hoarding poisons. It's preserved by destroying them. I did what was necessary. And I still gave you what you wanted. That's not a violation. That's an upgrade to the mission parameters. Before she could form a rebuttal, the doors to the command deck hissed open. Elder Maxon stood waiting for them, his arms crossed over his ornate power armor, his youthful face a mask of grim impatience. The air crackled with tension. Report, Knight Captain, Maxon commanded. Serafina snapped to attention, her personal feelings locked away behind a wall of military professionalism. Elder, the mission was a success. Fort Strong has been neutralized. The super mutant threat is eliminated. And the asset, Maxon's cold eyes flickered to the duffel bag being processed by his scribes. Acquired, Serafina confirmed. The asset is a pre-war FEV research laboratory. The primary viral stores were destroyed during the engagement, but we have secured viable samples for research, as per your directive. Destroyed. Maxon's gaze sharpened, fixing on Naruto. Explain. The asset was a festering wound, Naruto said, stepping forward, unafraid. Leaving it intact was a strategic liability. I sterilized the source of the infection. A sample for study is logical. A factory for producing monsters is not. Maxon stared at him, a long, unnerving silence stretching across the deck. He was weighing the outcome. The fort was neutralized. The samples were secured. Naruto had not only succeeded, but he had also taken the initiative to make a command decision that, while insubordinate, aligned with the Brotherhood's long-term goal of eradicating mutants. He had demonstrated not just power, but strategic thinking. Your methods are borderline heretical, Asset, Maxon finally declared. But your results are acceptable. It was the closest the Elder would ever come to giving a compliment. You have proven your potential utility. For now, the Alliance holds. You and your companions will remain aboard the Pride-One. You will be on call. For when we have need of a specialist. He turned to Serafina. The Knight Captain will be your handler. She will assign you quarters and see that your companions are comfortable. Do not mistake this for hospitality. It is a tactical decision. With that, he turned his back on them, dismissing them. The audience was over. Serafina led him away, her posture rigid. You have a talent for turning potential execution into promotion, she noted dryly. I have a talent for being right, Naruto corrected with a small smile. She led him to the guarded room where his friends were being held. When the door opened, a wave of relief washed over the faces of the four women inside. They saw he was unharmed, and they saw from the demeanor of the guards that his status had changed. The Elder has granted you provisional status as allies, Serafina announced formally to the room. You will be afforded guest quarters. Your movements will be restricted to this deck. I will be your point of contact. She then looked at Curie. Elder Maxon has also authorized lab access for the robotic unit, under my direct supervision. He is curious about its analytical capabilities, given the new biological samples. She looked back at Naruto, a silent message passing between them. This is your reward. Don't make me regret it. Then, with a crisp nod, she was gone. The moment the door closed, the room exploded with questions. What happened? Did you get it? Did you find anything? Piper asked, her notepad already in her hand. Did you kill the bastards? Kate demanded, her eyes searching his for any sign of weakness. Naruto held up his hands, calming the storm. He recounted the events at Fort Strong, omitting the more spectacular, reality-bending details of his sage mode, but giving them the substance. To Kate, he said, the super mutant nest is gone. All of them. They won't be troubling anyone ever again. A dark, grim satisfaction settled on her face. It wasn't her fist that had done it, but justice had been served. It was enough. To Piper, he said, the Brotherhood is exactly what we thought. They're hoarders, zealots convinced of their own righteousness. They wanted the FEV factory, not just the research. I can't give you their hard data yet, it would compromise my position, but I can tell you their command structure, their numbers, their ultimate goal, complete control of the Commonwealth and all its technology. It's enough to start your story." Piper's eyes narrowed in thought, her mind already weaving the narrative, filing away the details for the exposé that would shake the wasteland. To Alara, he looked with a shared understanding. "You were right," he said softly. "Their faith is in steel. They wanted the poison. They see power only as a thing to be owned." Alara nodded, her expression somber. Her fears had been confirmed, but she also saw that Naruto had navigated their zealotry without being consumed by it, and her quiet faith in him deepened. Finally, he turned to Curie. From a small, sealed pouch on his belt, he produced a single, small vial containing a swirl of the vile, green fev. "I saved this for you. Your research is important, but be careful, Curie. This knowledge is a dangerous power." Curie's cheerful, feminine voice rose in an uncharacteristic shriek of pure, unadulterated scientific ecstasy. "Sacra Blue. It is fev, in a stable, contained solution. The research possibilities, the genetic sequencing, the potential for creating targeted retroviruses. Oh, Major Naruto, this is a gift more precious than 1,000 fusion cores." She took the vial with a reverence that bordered on worship. "With this, and the Brotherhood's data, I can finally begin my analysis of the sample from the memory den safe. I will unlock its secrets." 2 days passed. A strange, tense domesticity settled over the group. They were guests, and they were prisoners. Naruto spent his time in quiet meditation, trying to restore the chakra he had so violently expended in the glowing sea, and attempting to subtly map the energy systems of the Pride One. Piper interviewed off-duty knights and scribes under the guise of casual conversation, gathering intelligence. Kate threw herself into a brutal training regimen, pushing her body to its limits, her new opponent the memory of her own weakness. Alara engaged the Brotherhood scribes in deep, philosophical debates, her gentle but incisive questions planting tiny seeds of doubt in their dogmatic certainty. Curie, however, was in heaven. She was given a small, sterile laboratory, a corner of the main res. Bay where Serafina could keep a watchful eye on her. Surrounded by technology she had only ever dreamed of, she worked with a tireless, feverish passion. It was on the evening of the second day that she called for them. Naruto, Piper, Kate, and Alara were escorted by a taciturn knight to her lab. They found Curie hovering over a glowing terminal, her metallic body language radiating frantic excitement. Serafina was there as well, leaning against a bulkhead, her arms crossed, observing. "I have done it," Curie announced, her voice buzzing. "I have analyzed the sample from Irma's safe. The results are perplexing and deeply alarming." She projected a complex, holographic image of a molecule into the air. "This is the primary agent. It is not a poison. It is not a virus. It is a biomarker. A sophisticated, nanite-based tracking agent designed to bond to a very specific protein structure." "A tracking agent," Piper said, stepping closer. "So the Institute was using it to track someone." "Precisamente," Curie chirped. "But here is where it becomes alarming. I cross-referenced the protein it bonds to with the FEV data and the Brotherhood's research on synthetic organisms. The air in the room grew cold. The protein is not found in humans, or ghouls, or super mutants. It is found exclusively in the biological components of Generation 3 synths." A stunned silence fell. "So he Institute planted a tracker on one of their own synths," Kate said. "Why, that is not the most alarming discovery," Curie said, her voice dropping a synthesized octave. "While calibrating my equipment, I ran a baseline scan of our local environment, and I detected trace amounts of the same biomarker." "What do you mean?" Naruto asked, a sudden, cold dread seeping into him. Curie turned her optical lens towards them. "I mean, I have detected its presence right here. In this room." She projected a new image, a scan of the 5 of them. And next to each of their names, a tiny, red light was blinking. "It is on all of us. On our clothes. On our skin. We have all been marked." The implication crashed over them like a tidal wave. "The memory den," Piper whispered, her face pale. "When we were there, Irma. She must have exposed us somehow. A fine mist, maybe. In the air. But why?" Kate demanded. "Why would she mark us?" "Because," Naruto said, his voice grim as he connected the final, terrible dot. Irma is not just a collaborator. She is the asset. He looked at the blinking red lights. And the memory den is not just a drop point. It's a listening post. Serafina pushed herself off the wall. Her expression of detached curiosity replaced by one of high alert. A synth infiltrator, running a major settlement in Goodneighbor, marking high-value targets. This is intelligence of the highest priority. Elder Maxon must be informed immediately. No, Naruto said, holding up a hand. Not yet. If you make a move now, the Institute will know we're on to them. They will scrub their network, and Irma will disappear. We have a unique opportunity here. They think we are ignorant. They think we are just another group of wasters, being passively monitored. What are you proposing? Serafina asked, her professional suspicion warring with the undeniable logic of his words. We play their game, Naruto said, a dangerous glint in his blue eyes. We go back to Goodneighbor. We go back to the memory den. And we have a conversation with Irma. But this time, we'll be the ones asking the questions. The plan was audacious and incredibly risky. To walk back into the spider's web, knowing the spider was watching. But it was the only way. Maxon, after a tense, closed-door meeting with Naruto and Serafina, reluctantly agreed, seeing the immense intelligence value. His condition was that Serafina and a small, covert team of knights would accompany them, remaining out of sight, ready to intervene if things went wrong. Their arrival in Goodneighbor was different this time. They were not weary travelers seeking refuge. They were a scalpel, poised to excise a tumor. The grimy, neon-lit town seemed more menacing now, every shadow a potential observer, every friendly face a potential mask. They walked into the memory den. The same hypnotic hum, the same scent of incense, the same patrons lost in their dreams. And Irma, standing behind her counter, as elegant and poised as ever. She greeted them with her usual smoky, welcoming smile. Welcome back, she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. I trust your visit to the vault was productive. Very, Naruto said, walking slowly towards the counter. Piper, Kate, Alara, and Curie fanned out, subtly cutting off any escape routes. We found out a lot of things. About a great many secrets. Irma's smile didn't falter, but her eyes, those sharp, intelligent ghoul eyes, grew cautious. Goodneighbor is full of secrets, my dear. It's our primary export. We're interested in one secret in particular, Naruto said, his voice dropping. We're interested in a biomarker. A tracking agent, one designed specifically for Generation 3 synths. For the first time since they had met her, Irma's composure cracked. It was a micro-expression. A flicker of her eyelid, a slight tightening of her lips, but to Naruto's heightened senses, it was as loud as a gunshot. She had not expected them to know. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Her voice a shade too smooth. Don't you? Naruto said, leaning on the counter, his friendly demeanor gone, replaced by a cold, sharp intensity. It's funny. We found a terminal in the mayor's office in Diamond City. It had a report on it. Mentioned an asset in Goodneighbor. And it was signed by someone named Father. At the mention of that name, Irma froze. The mask didn't just crack. It shattered. The warm, charismatic businesswoman vanished, replaced by something cold, alien, and utterly devoted. Her eyes seemed to lose their focus for a second, as if she were accessing a different file. A different persona. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Devoid of its smoky charm, it was flat, analytical, and filled with a chilling, unshakable conviction. You cannot comprehend what we are doing. What he is doing. The surface is a cesspool. A failed experiment. Humanity is killing itself with radiation, chems, and tribalism. It must be redefined, guided, replaced with something better, something cleaner. Father is the architect of humanity's future. It was a confession. Piper gasped. Kate drew her knife, but Naruto held up a hand, stopping them. So you drug your customers, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. You tag them like animals so your father can watch them from his hole in the ground. You betray their trust. How is that a better future? The future is not built on trust, the thing that was Irma replied. It is built on data. On control. We are the shepherds, and you are the sheep. And you, Naruto Uzumaki, you are An anomaly we have been watching with great interest ever since you awoke. A variable that must be understood. And, if necessary, contained. She subtly reached for a button under the counter. A silent alarm. But Naruto was faster. He didn't move to stop her hand. His own hand shot out, not in a strike, but with his fingers splayed. He slammed his palm onto her forehead. "Contain this," he whispered. Blue chakra erupted from his palm. It was not a blast of force, but an intricate, glowing pattern, a spiral of complex characters that flowed from his hand onto her skin, burning with a cold, blue light. It was Fuinjutsu, a sealing jutsu, not one designed to harm, but to isolate. Irma, the synth, shrieked, a sound of corrupted data and overloaded circuits. The light flared, and the intricate Al burned itself into her synthetic skin, glowing for a moment before fading, leaving only a faint, tattoo-like mark on her forehead. She slumped against the counter, her eyes wide with a new kind of terror. Not fear of death, but fear of disconnection. What did you do to me?" She stammered, her voice her own again, but laced with panic. She tried to access her internal connection to the Institute network, her lifeline to Father. But there was nothing, only static, a wall of impenetrable, alien energy. He had severed her connection to the hive mind. He had turned her from an agent into an island. "I put you in quarantine," Naruto said, pulling his hand back. "You're still you, but your father can't hear you anymore. No one can." He leaned in close. "And now, Irma, you're going to tell us everything. You're going to become our asset. You're going to tell us about Father. You're going to tell us about the Institute. Because the sheep are tired of being watched. And we're coming for the shepherd." The shadow of the Institute was no longer just a shadow. It had a face, and a name. And for the first time, it had a reason to be afraid. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Battle for Bunker Hill. The air in the memory den, once thick with incense and escapism, was now sharp with the metallic tang of fear. Irma, or the synthetic shell that wore her face, was broken. The Fuinjutsu seal on her forehead was a faint, dark spiral. A brand of disconnection. Her link to the Institute, her father, was gone. She was an orphan in a world she had only ever observed through a lens of cold, calculated superiority. The terror of true isolation was a more effective interrogation tool than any threat of violence. "Why?" she whimpered, her voice stripped of its smoky charm, now thin and reedy. "Why Bunker Hill? What are they doing?" It was Serafina who asked, her voice hard as iron, stepping forward to loom over the trembling synth. Irma flinched. "A retrieval," she stammered, the words tumbling out. Her programmed devotion now replaced by a desperate instinct for self-preservation. "A group of assets, escaped. Gen 3's seeking liberation." She spat the word like a curse. "They were smuggled to Bunker Hill. The railroad is protecting them. Father will not tolerate loose ends. He sees it as a system contagion." "The railroad," Piper interjected, her eyes wide. She knew of the Secker Tive organization that helped escaped synths. "They were ghosts, a myth to most. They are a sentimental disease," Irma continued, her gaze unfocused. "Father ordered a full-scale reclamation. A courser is leading the operation. They will secure the assets and sanitize the location. Eliminate the railroad presence, neutralize the local militia. Make an example of them. Bunker Hill will become the Institute's first surface embassy. A foothold." When Naruto's voice cut through the room, sharp and cold, Irma looked at the pre-war clock on the wall, a meaningless decoration until this moment. Quote, "The operation was scheduled to begin at dusk, when the caravan traffic is lowest." Dusk was less than an hour away. The room erupted into controlled chaos. "We have to warn them," Piper insisted. "The militia there won't stand a chance against a courser." "Warn them," Serafina countered, her hand already on her comm unit. "This is a tactical gift. The Institute, the railroad, and a host of rogue synths, all gathered in one place. Elder Maxon will authorize a full cleansing. We can wipe out 3 of our primary enemies in a single strike." "You can't be serious," Piper shot back, aghast. "The are dozens of civilians at Bunker Hill. Traitors, families, casualties of war are a regrettable necessity in the preservation of humanity," Serafina stated, her voice devoid of emotion, the brotherhood dogma reasserting itself. "Enough," Naruto's voice boomed, silencing the argument. All eyes turned to him. He was no longer the calm diplomat or the detached warrior. The full weight of his leadership, the presence of the seventh Hokage, filled the room. There will be no cleansing. We are not going to stand by while innocent people are slaughtered by either the Institute or the Brotherhood. We are not choosing between two different brands of tyranny. He looked at Serafina, his blue eyes blazing. Knight Captain, you will get on your comm unit. You will tell Elder Maxon that the Institute is making a major surface move and that I am moving to intercept. You will tell him that if he wants to prove the Brotherhood as a shield for humanity and not just its jailer, he will provide air support and ground troops. Not to cleanse, but to defend. To protect civilians and eliminate the Institute's forces. This is his chance to win the hearts and minds of the Commonwealth. Tell him not to waste it. He then turned to his own group. Piper, you know the people. You'll coordinate the civilian evacuation and the militia. Kate, you're on the front line. You'll hold the main approach. Alara, you're with Piper. You'll organize triage for the wounded. Your faith is in life now. Go prove it. Curie, you're with me. I need your analytical mind and your new upgrades. During their time on the Pride-One, with access to its labs and schematics, Curie had successfully overseen the construction of her new body, a sleek, advanced synth form that combined human dexterity with robotic precision. Irma, he said, his voice dropping, you're going to show us the Institute's exact infiltration routes on a map. Now, there was no argument. His authority was absolute. Serafina, after a tense moment of internal conflict, nodded curtly and began relaying the message, her words carefully chosen to frame the operation as a strategic opportunity Maxon couldn't refuse. Irma, trembling, led out a map and began marking it with synth patrol routes and the courser's projected entry point. A fragile, desperate alliance was mobilized, racing against the dying light. They arrived at Bunk R Hill as the sun bled across the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and blood. The towering central monument was a dark spear against the twilight, and the bustling trade hub at its base was beginning to quiet down for the night. The air smelled of wood smoke, roasted Brahmin, and a nervous, pre-combat tension. The plan moved with frantic speed. Piper, using her reputation in Naruto's name, which was already becoming a legend after his exploits, rallied the local militia and the shell-shocked traders. She established evacuation routes into the monument's catacombs and set up defensive positions, her voice, usually used for uncovering truth, now used for inspiring courage. Alara was at her side, her calm demeanor a balm on the terrified civilians. She spoke with a quiet authority, her past life as a cultist giving her an unexpected gift for managing frightened crowds. She designated a makeshift infirmary and began organizing medical supplies, her hands moving with a steady purpose. Kate, armed with a combat shotgun and a look of grim determination, took a small squad of the bravest militia members to the main northern approach. The sober warrior had replaced the berserker. Her commands were sharp, her tactical sense acute. She was not fighting for a chem-fueled thrill, she was a shield, a wall of defiance against the coming storm. Naruto and Curie climbed to the top of the monument, the wind whipping at them as they looked down upon the battlefield. Curie's new synth body moved with silent, fluid grace. I am detecting multiple, high-frequency transmissions from the northeast, she reported. Her voice now emanating from a vocalizer that sounded almost human. The Institute forces are in position. They move with remarkable stealth and coordination. They're a scalpel, Naruto murmured, his eyes scanning the darkening streets. Designed to cut deep and fast. The attack began not with a bang, but with a whisper. Figures in sleek, white armor emerged from the shadows, their laser rifles firing with methodical precision. The Gen 1 and Gen 2 synths were the infantry, a tide of disposable plastic and steel. They were met by a hail of gunfire from Kate's position. Here come the bastards. Kate roared over the comms, a shotgun blast punctuating her sentence. Give 'em hell. The northern barricade erupted in a storm of lead and laser fire. But the true threat appeared moments later. A single figure, clad in a black, armored trench coat, moved through the chaos with an inhuman speed and grace. It dispatched two militia members with a series of precise, lightning-fast shots from a high-powered energy pistol. The courser, Curie identified, her optical sensors zooming in. Superior strength, speed, and cognitive processing. It is the alpha predator of this ecosystem. The courser ignored the main fight, heading directly for a specific warehouse near the base of the monument. Irma's intelligence had been correct. That was where the escaped synths were hiding. Curie, analyze their battle network. Find the command frequency, Naruto ordered. I'm going to say hello to their field commander. Before she could reply, he was gone, a blur of motion leaping from the monument. He landed silently on a rooftop overlooking the courser's path. He watched as the synth assassin efficiently, brutally, cut its way through any resistance. It was a perfect killing machine. Naruto dropped down in front of it, blocking its path. That's far enough, he said. The courser stopped. Its face was eerily human but utterly devoid of emotion, its eyes cold, dead glass. Anomaly designated, Uzumaki. It said, its voice a flat, synthesized monotone. You are interfering with an institute directive. Cease your resistance or you will be neutralized. I'm going to have to say no. Naruto replied with a slight smile. The courser didn't waste another word. It lunged, its pistol firing in a 3-shot burst. Naruto sidestepped, the laser bolts searing the air where he had been. The courser was fast, inhumanly so, but to Naruto's sage-enhanced senses, it was still just a machine. He closed the distance, and their battle became a close-quarters dance of death. The courser's movements were optimized, brutally efficient. Naruto's were fluid, unpredictable, and backed by a strength that the machine could not comprehend. While Naruto occupied the courser, the rest of the battle raged. Kate's barricade was beginning to buckle under the sheer weight of numbers. Alara was overwhelmed with wounded civilians in the infirmary. Piper was desperately trying to rally a group of defenders whose line was about to break. It was then that the sky roared. 3 vertibirds swept in low over Bunker Hill, their searchlights cutting through the smoke, their side Mo. NTED Gatling lasers opening up on the largest concentrations of synth forces. A wave of white armor was shredded into molten plastic. From the lead vertibird, ropes dropped, and Serafina and her squad of knights descended. Their power armor hitting the ground with earth-shaking thuds. The Brotherhood had arrived. All units, form a defensive perimeter around the monument. Serafina commanded. Our amplified voice cutting through the din of battle. Priority is civilian protection and elimination of hostile synths. Let no machine stand. The tide of the battle turned instantly. The Brotherhood's overwhelming firepower was a sledgehammer to the Institute's scalpel. Kate's position was reinforced, and she grinned fiercely as she fought alongside the walking tanks. Took you long enough, tin cans. She yelled. But the situation grew more complex. A new group of fighters emerged from the warehouse, the railroad. Clad in worn leathers and armed with scavenged weapons, they fought with a desperate ferocity. Not just to defeat the Institute, but to protect the terrified synths huddled behind them. The battlefield was now a chaotic 3-way, soon to be 4-way, war. The Institute trying to reclaim its property. The railroad trying to protect them. The Brotherhood trying to destroy all synths, hostile or not. And Naruto's small group, trying to hold the entire, fragile coalition together. The breaking point came when the courser, realizing it could not defeat Naruto in a direct confrontation, changed tactics. It fired a signaling device into the air. In response, 2 massive, heavily armored Gen 2 synths, their arms replaced with rocket launchers, emerged from an alleyway. They fired, not at the Brotherhood, but at the base of the main monument, where Piper and the civilians were sheltering. No, Naruto roared. He saw the rockets streaking towards their target. Serafina saw it too. Her orders were clear. Eliminate the synths. But a direct assault on the rocket wielders would take too long. This was the moment. The choice. He could let the Brotherhood handle it their way, with massive, indiscriminate firepower that would likely bring the monument down on top of everyone. He could let the railroad sacrifice themselves trying to protect their charges. Or he could intervene. He chose the third option. Everyone, brace yourselves. He yelled into his comm. He flashed through a dozen hand signs in a blur. Then slammed his palm onto the rooftop he stood on. Sage art. Genesis of 1,000 trees. It was not the world-altering jutsu he had once been capable of, but in this world of weakened natural energy. It was a godlike act. The ground of Bunker Hill erupted. Massive, twisting roots and colossal trees burst from the concrete and dirt. They did not attack. They defended. A thick wall of instantaneous, living wood rose up in front of the monument, catching the rockets in a shower of splinters. More trees erupted across the battlefield, separating the warring factions, creating impassable walls between the Brotherhood and the railroad, isolating squads of Institute synths, and forming protective barriers around pockets of civilians. The entire battlefield was transformed in seconds into a dense, unnatural forest. The fighting sputtered to a halt, every single combatant, human, synth, and power-armored soldier, staring in stunned, silent disbelief. In the sudden, eerie quiet, Naruto appeared in the center of it all, standing atop the tallest, newly formed tree. The faint golden glow of his imperfect sage mode radiated from him, a beacon of impossible power. "The fighting is over," he declared, his voice amplified by his chakra, reaching every corner of the new forest. "The Institute has lost. Their forces are scattered and broken." He looked down, his gaze sweeping over the leaders of the different factions. "Tonight, we all had a choice. To destroy, or to defend. The Brotherhood chose to defend humanity. The Railroad chose to defend their ideals. My friends chose to defend their home." He focused on the remaining Institute synths, now trapped and isolated. "Your mission is a failure. Report that back to your father. Report to him that the surface is no longer his laboratory. It is protected." He then turned his gaze to the Brotherhood. "Serafina, stand your men down. The threat is neutralized. The Railroad and their charges will be allowed to leave peacefully under my protection." A tense standoff ensued. The Railroad agents looked at him with awe and hope. The Brotherhood Knights looked to Serafina, their weapons still raised, their programming screaming at them to destroy the abominations hiding in the trees. Serafina stared up at Naruto, a man wreathed in golden light, standing on a tree that had not existed 5 seconds ago. He had saved her, saved the civilians, and defeated the Institute, all without firing a shot. He had shown her a third way. Not destruction, not retreat, but a power so vast it could simply end a war by refusing to let it be fought. "Stand down," she commanded her knights, her voice ringing with a newfound authority that was entirely her own. "The anomaly, our ally, has spoken. The battle is won." As the railroad quietly spirited away the escaped synths in the confusion of the new forest, and as the Brotherhood began securing the perimeter, Naruto dropped down from his perch. His friends gathered around him, their faces reflecting their own mix of exhaustion and sheer awe. The battle for Bunker Hill was over. The Institute had been dealt its first major public defeat. The Brotherhood had been forced to act as protectors, not just conquerors. The railroad had saved their people, and in the center of it all stood one man. He was no longer just an anomaly, an asset, or a stranger. He had become the fulcrum upon which the entire fate of the Commonwealth now rested. He was the sage of the Wasteland, and he had just redrawn the map of a new world. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Sage's Path. The silence that fell upon Bunker Hill was a sacred, terrifying thing. It was heavier than the smoke, deeper than the new, unnatural shadows cast by the forest that now stood where a marketplace had been. The groans of the wounded, the distant crackle of fires, and the whispering of the wind through newly formed leaves were the only sounds in a world that had, moments before, been a symphony of chaos and destruction. Warriors from 3 different factions, men and women who had been trying to kill each other seconds ago, now stood frozen, staring at the impossible foliage, their weapons hanging limp in their hands. Their war had not ended, it had simply been rendered obsolete. At the center of it all, Naruto Uzumaki stood, the golden light of his wasteland sage mode fading from his form, leaving him looking smaller. More human, yet somehow more imposing than any power-armored soldier. The raw, cosmic power had receded, replaced by an authority that was quieter but infinitely more profound. He had not just won a battle. He had imposed a peace. His friends gathered around the base of the tree he descended from, their faces a gallery of awe and concern. Kate looked up at him, her usual defiant smirk absent, replaced by a raw, unvarnished respect. She had seen power her whole life, the power of a fist, a chem, a gun. This was something else entirely, a power that could command life itself. It made all the other powers she had known seem like children's toys. Piper had her notepad out, but her hand was still. "How did you report on a miracle? How did you frame a head L?" In for a man who could turn a battlefield into a forest. The story was too big for paper. Alara's face was serene, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. It was not a look of sadness, but of overwhelming, cathartic confirmation. She had abandoned a god of decay and division, and in its place, she had found a man who embodied creation and unity. This was the sermon her soul had been searching for. Curie, in her new, sleek synth body, was a whirlwind of analysis, her head tilted as she scanned the trees. The cellular regeneration is instantaneous. The energy required violates the known laws of thermodynamics. She murmured, her scientific wonder a prayer in its own right. He is not just manipulating biology, he is rewriting physics. Serafina was the last to approach. She and her knights stood apart, their power armor looking clumsy and artificial amidst the organic, vibrant power of Naruto's jutsu. She had given the order to stand down, an act of insubordination that should have terrified her. But as she looked at the man who had single-handedly saved hundreds of lives and ended a multi-factional war without taking a single step towards vengeance, she felt no fear. Only the dizzying, terrifying sensation of her entire worldview crumbling to dust, to be replaced by something new and uncertain. The hostile forces are neutralized or have withdrawn, she reported, her voice, usually so crisp and amplified, sounding small in the vast silence. There are no civilian casualties beyond what was sustained in the initial attack. Good, Naruto said, his voice raspy with exhaustion. The backlash from drawing on so much corrupted natural energy was hitting him, a deep ache in his very soul. See to the wounded, all of them, railroad, militia, even the disabled institute synths. Tonight, there are no factions. Only survivors. His words were a quiet command, but they carried more weight than any order from Elder Maxon. Serafina found herself nodding, not as a soldier to a superior, but as a person recognizing a fundamental truth. My men will assist, she said, before turning to relay the new, unthinkable orders to her squad. The journey back to the Pridewan was a slow, somber procession. The vertibirds flew over the newly forested Bunker Hill, a glowing green scar of life on the brown, blighted landscape, a testament to the night's events. When they landed on the flight deck, there was no celebration. The knights and scribes who met them moved with a quiet, unnerved reverence. The news had already spread. The stories, exaggerated and whispered, had painted a picture of a god walking the wasteland. Elder Maxon was waiting for them on the command deck. The air was colder than the high-altitude wind, thick with a volatile mixture of fury and pragmatism. Serafina gave her report, her voice clear and unwavering, detailing the Institute's defeat, the protection of the civilians, and the unilateral ceasefire Naruto had imposed. She did not try to hide her own decision to stand down. When she was finished, Maxon was silent for a full minute, his cold eyes fixed on Naruto. You allowed the railroad to escape, he stated, his voice dangerously low. You allowed their stolen property, those abominations, to scatter. You defied the will of this brotherhood. Your brotherhood was about to engage in a massacre that would have turned the entire Commonwealth against you, Naruto countered, his weariness replaced by a steely resolve. I gave you a victory. The Institute was beaten, publicly. You were seen as protectors. That is a strategic asset more valuable than a dozen dead synths. Or have you forgotten that this is a war for hearts and minds, not just for territory? I have forgotten nothing, Maxon snapped. I am the scion of a legacy T has fought to preserve humanity for 200 years. We do not need the hearts and minds of wasters and junkers. We need order. We need purity. Purity is an illusion, Naruto said, taking a step forward. The guards tensed, but Maxon waved them down. Order without justice is just tyranny. You hide in this ship, convinced of your own righteousness, while the world below suffers. You call me an anomaly, a threat. But the people of Bunker Hill call me a savior. Who do you think history will remember, Elder? The man who hoarded the past, or the one who built the future? The command deck was silent enough to hear the hum of the ship's fusion core. Serafina held her breath. This was it, the breaking point. Maxon stared at Naruto, his jaw clenched so tightly it was a wonder his teeth didn't crack. He was a zealot, a true believer, but he was not a fool. He had seen the recordings from Serafina's helmet cam. He had seen the raw data from the energy spike. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core. That the man standing before him wielded a power beyond his comprehension. He could not control it. He could not replicate it. And he knew, with grudging certainty, that he could not destroy it without sacrificing the Pride itself. You have become a power in this land, Uzumaki, Maxon said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. A third pillar, standing between and the order of the Brotherhood and the cancer of the Institute. To fight you would be strategically inefficient at this juncture. It was a concession, a surrender wrapped in the language of tactics. Therefore, Maxon continued, his voice dripping with reluctance, I am amending our arrangement. You and your council will be granted autonomy. You are no longer an asset, but an independent, allied power. We will provide you with supplies and intelligence support. In return, you will continue to act as a deterrent to the Institute and other major threats to the Commonwealth. We will recognize your authority over a designated territory, for you to use as a base of operations. He gestured to a large, holographic map of the Commonwealth. Choose your territory. Naruto looked at the map. He could choose Diamond City, a seat of political power. He could choose a military installation, a source of weaponry. Instead, he pointed to a tall, skeletal skyscraper near the center of the Boston ruins, not far from the Charles River. There, he said, we'll take the top floors of the mass fusion building. Maxon raised an eyebrow. It's a ruin. It has no strategic value. It has a view, Naruto replied simply. Sometimes, you need to see the whole board to make the right move. The agreement was struck. It was not a friendship. It was a treaty between wary, distrustful powers, a ceasefire born of mutual necessity. As they left the command deck, Serafina walked beside him for a moment. The elder is not a man who compromises, she said quietly. You have shaken the very foundation of this brotherhood. Foundations need to be shaken sometimes, Naruto replied. It's how you see if they're strong enough to build on. He paused and looked at her. You made the right choice tonight, Knight Captain. A faint, almost imperceptible warmth touched her cheeks. I followed the most logical tactical path to ensure mission success and the preservation of civilian life, she stated, well-rehearsed words a shield for the unfamiliar emotions churning within her. Naruto just smiled. Keep telling yourself that, Serafina. They called it the Roost. The top 5 floors of the ruined mass fusion building were a wreck of shattered glass, rusted steel, and wind-blown debris. But with the help of a Brotherhood engineering team, part of their new alliance, and Naruto's own uncanny ability to reinforce structures with chakra, it was transformed. It became a sanctuary, a fortress, and a home. The panoramic view was breathtaking, a constant reminder of the broken but beautiful world they were fighting for. Bunker Hill's Genesis Forest was a vibrant green jewel to the north. The Pridewind was a permanent, watchful star in the sky. And to the southeast, the ruins of the CIT, the Institute's hidden lair, were a cancerous shadow. Here, in the days following the battle, the true nature of their alliance, their family, was forged. The Roost became their council chamber. One afternoon, Naruto found Piper on the highest balcony, a pre-war binocular scope scavenged from a gunner outpost pressed to her eyes. Stacks of her newly printed paper, now titled Commonwealth Chronicle, lay beside her. Weighted down with a piece of rubble. The headline screamed, Savior at Bunker Hill. Mystery Force halts Institute attack, Brotherhood defends civilians. You're spinning the story, Naruto noted, leaning on the railing beside her. I'm not spinning it. I'm aiming it, she corrected, not lowering the scope. People were scared. They saw the Brotherhood as conquerors and the Institute as boogeymen. Now they have hope. They have a story about people fighting for them. About a power that isn't about guns or radiation. She finally lowered the scope and looked at him, her intelligent eyes alight with passion. You gave them that, Naruto. But hope is a fire. It needs fuel. We need to build something permanent out of that victory. A real Commonwealth Council. Diamond City, good neighbor, the settlements, united. With you as the guarantor of its peace. We can do it, with my words and your everything else. He saw the fierce intelligence, the unwavering belief in the power of truth and people. And felt a profound respect. It's a good dream, Piper. We'll make it happen. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that made her face radiant. For a moment, the space between them shrank. The professional respect charged with a personal warmth that was as bright as the afternoon sun. He found Kate in what they had designated the training room. She was practicing, not with a shotgun, but with a simple wooden staff. Her movements were sharp, precise, and for the first time, controlled. The rage was still there, a fire deep within her, but now it was a forge, not a wildfire. "You're favoring your left side," he said, entering the room. She stopped, breathing heavily, sweat glistening on her brow. "Old habits die hard," she grunted. "Still feels like I'm crawling out of my own skin half the time. The cravings, they're quieter now. But they're still there. They always will be," he said, his voice gentle. "They are a part of your story, Kate. A scar you earned in a war you survived. They don't have to be your master anymore." He picked up a second staff. "The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. It's connection. It's purpose." He tossed the staff to her. "You have a purpose now. You're a guardian, a protector. Your strength will be a shield for others. Let me show you how to make that shield stronger." They sparred. It wasn't a fight, it was a lesson. He showed her how to channel her intent, her spirit, into her movements. He showed her that true strength wasn't about breaking things, but about the control and discipline not to. In the dance of their mock combat, she felt a connection. A trust that went deeper than words. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was showing her how to forge herself into something stronger, using the broken pieces of her past as the raw material. When they finished, she looked at him, her green eyes clear and fierce, and he saw not an addict or a brawler, but a warrior who had finally found a banner worth fighting for. He discovered Curie in their new makeshift laboratory, surrounded by a dizzying array of scavenged terminals and brotherhood tech, all linked to her own synth mind. She was projecting a complex, holographic map of the human genome, with the FEV and the Institute tracker data overlaid. "It is remarkable," she said as he entered. She was still getting used to her new body, her gestures a fascinating blend of human fluidity and robotic precision. Father's genius was terrifying. The FEV was a blunt instrument. But this tracker, and other data I have uncovered, he is pursuing targeted genetic modification. He is trying to create a perfect human, one designed to survive this new world, and he is using the synths as a bridge, a testbed. The question is no longer what he is doing, but why. Naruto looked at the complex data, at the cold, clinical lines of code that defined life and its perversion. He's trying to play God, Curie. It's the oldest story there is. Perhaps, she mused, turning her startlingly human-like eyes to him. But this form, this body, I feel the cool air on my synthetic skin. I can appreciate the aesthetic quality of a sunset. These are sensations my programming cannot quantify. You spoke of a soul, a heart. I believe the Institute's great failure is that in trying to redefine humanity, they have forgotten what it means to be human. She reached out and touched his arm, her fingers cool. You have not forgotten. You are the most human person I have ever met. Please, continue to teach me. Her quest for knowledge had evolved into a quest for understanding, and he was her primary text. He sought out Alara on the rooftop garden she had started, a small patch of impossible green in a world of concrete and steel, grown from soil she had painstaken. Gly hauled up from Bunker Hill's Genesis forest. She was kneeling, tending to a small, sprouting corn stalk, her face peaceful. They are calling you a god, she said, without looking up. The traders, the settlers. The whispers are everywhere. I'm not a god, Alara, he said softly, kneeling beside her. That power, it hurt. It felt like drinking poison. I don't know if I can do it again. She finally looked at him. Her gray eyes filled with a wisdom that seemed ancient. That is why you are not a god, she said. And that is why they are right to have faith. A god feels no pain in his miracles. A god demands worship. You bleed, and you ask for nothing. She gently touched one of the green leaves. My old faith was in the end of things. In the glory of division. It was a cold, empty faith. You have shown me a new one. A faith in the struggle. In the dirt, and the water, and the work it takes to make something grow. She looked at him, her expression serene. Do not carry the burden of their worship, Naruto. Just carry the burden of the garden. We will help you tend it. She had become his moral compass, the quiet voice that reminded him not of what he could do, but of who he should be. Later that evening, they all gathered on the main balcony. The lights of the Commonwealth spread out below them. An uneasy peace had settled. The five of them, Naruto and the four women who had bound their fates to his, looked out at the world they had inherited. "It's not going to be enough," Kate said bluntly, breaking the silence. "This alliance, one man, no matter how powerful, can't hold a whole world together." "She is correct," Curie agreed. "Logistically, it is an unsustainable model." "Then we change the model," Piper said, her voice filled with conviction. "It's not about one man. It's about an idea, and we," she looked around at the group, "are the first committee of that new idea." It was Alara who put the final piece into place. "A body needs a heart to pump the blood," she said softly. "But it also needs the mind to guide it, the hands to build, and the spirit to give it purpose. No one part is more important than the other." Naruto listened, a slow smile spreading across his face. He looked at each of them. Piper, his voice; Kate, his shield; Curie, his mind; Alara, his soul. This was not a harem, a collection of lovers vying for his attention. This was a council, a partnership, a family forged in the fires of a broken world. He felt a wave of affection and respect for them so powerful it dwarfed even the chakra that churned within him. But as this feeling of peace and purpose settled over them, a flicker of movement from the street below caught Naruto's eye. A lone figure, walking calmly out of the shadows and into the center of the empty street. Directly below the mass fusion building. It was a synth, clean and unassuming. It looked up, directly at their balcony. "Incoming message," Curie said suddenly, her eyes glowing faintly. "It is unencrypted. It is being broadcast on an open channel, directly at us." The synth on the street did not speak. Instead, its head tilted, and a small projector in its eye cast a holographic image onto the wall of the building opposite them. It was a simple image, stark and terrifyingly clear. The swirling, spiral crest of the Uzumaki clan. But it was corrupted, warped. In its center was the cold, geometric gear symbol of the Institute. Then, a single, synthesized word echoed through the empty street, a word broadcast from the synth but meant only for Naruto, a word that ripped through 200 years of slumber and struck at the very core of his being. Kurama. The synth then collapsed, its systems fried. The hologram vanished, leaving only the chilling echo of that single word. A cold dread, more terrifying than any Deathclaw or super mutant, settled over Naruto. His companions stared at him, seeing the blood drain from his face. They knew his secrets, but this was the deepest one. The one that was a part of his very soul. The Institute didn't just know about him. They knew him. They knew his past, his power, his other half. The war for the Commonwealth was just the beginning. The battle for his own soul was about to begin. He looked out at the lights of the city, at the Pridewind hanging in the sky, at the green glow of his forest in the distance. He felt the presence of four incredible women standing beside him, their strength a bulwark at his back. The path was dark and uncertain, filled with shadows from a past he thought he had left behind. But for the first time since waking in this strange, broken world, he did not feel alone on that path. The war was over. The real battle had just begun. Chapter 10 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.